As the CEO of Medicon Valley Alliance, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this year's annual meeting. The moderator of today is Sarah Lidé. Sarah is Senior Strategy Manager at Medicon Valley Alliance and will guide us through today's exciting program. Please welcome Sarah.
Thank you, Petter, for the very warm introduction. As Petter mentioned, my name is Sarah Lidé, and I'll be guiding you through today's program. We have a really exciting program lined up with speakers and presentations, but before we dive in, I would just like to address some practical information for today's event. Firstly, you will have a chance to ask questions to the speakers throughout the event via Slido. You see on your screen the QR code as well as a link to access Slido. Key in the event code MVA20. And if you have your screen in minimized mode, you can also see Slido on the right side of your screen. We will also be launching live audience polls throughout the event, and you are very welcome to participate in them along the way. Kindly note that today's event will also be recorded, and this recording will be made available after the event. We will also be sending out a survey after the event to get your feedback on your experience and to help us improve future events. So we would strongly encourage you to respond to the survey. And once you've responded, you will receive a link where you get to access presentations from today's event as well. So we have a really packed program today with really interesting perspectives. First, we'll have a view on what's happening in Medicon Valley, the latest facts and figures and developments. And then we'll go into a discussion on the framework conditions for life science and innovation, with speakers providing an outside-in perspective to the topic. We will then move into a more investment-focused session, bringing in speakers with different perspectives from both Danish and Swedish sides, as well as an international perspective to shed light on the topic. And then we'll have some really exciting examples of how we're seeing innovation coming out of the region as a result of COVID-19. So I'm sure that all of us are keen to get into the program, and to help kickstart today's event, it is my privilege to welcome Petter Hartman. He is the CEO of Medicon Valley Alliance, and he will present some really fresh findings from the published State of Medicon Valley analysis. So Petter, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Medicon Valley Alliance annual meeting. This time in a fully virtual setting, and I guess we could say that the COVID-19 pandemic has impacted the whole society and will also influence, of course, today's agenda. As Sarah mentioned, we will have a certain section in the end of this day and the program where we'll discuss some research activities from both the private and the academic sector. But I also think and have to say that I believe that we are really well equipped in Scandinavia, in Denmark and Sweden, and in Medicon Valley as a binational cluster to cope with these type of challenges. And this is of course due to the fact that we have a very strong innovation capability in this region. We have a long tradition for private-public partnerships and for coming together when it matters most. But how do we utilize these kind of assets? These are questions I would like to discuss today, and I hope you will be engaging in the discussions by using Slido to ask questions, just as Sarah said, and also to answer the poll questions. But to start with, I would like to give you and share with you some highlights from our brand new State of Medicon Valley report. This report is our way to illustrate how the development looks like in Swedish and Danish life science in general, and of course have a look at some trends and developments also in Medicon Valley. The report is a result of a collaboration between Medicon Valley Alliance and our friends at the Öresund Institute, and I would like to thank Johan Westman and his team for producing the report for us. Much appreciated. Thank you so much. The report can be downloaded at mva.org. To start with, I guess we could say that the pandemic has really put a spotlight on the life science sector due to its ability, of course, to respond to the health challenge. But then the life science industry has, of course, also been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and the following financial crisis. We have seen layoffs in the industry. We have seen clinical trials being put on hold. We have seen delays in the delivery times due to dysfunctional value chains in the spring, etc. But I think as well that what has struck me is also how fast our healthcare system has been able to adapt to the situation, ramping up capacity when it matters most. And I also think it's quite impressive when you look at the universities and the activities going on the healthcare, on the university hospitals in the region, to see how many research initiatives that have been started since the COVID-19 hit us. More than 200 research projects related to COVID-19 has been started throughout the year. And this testifies to me that our innovation capacity is in good shape. But the life science sector and the life science industry is not only about coping with the health challenge as such, it's also an important tool for restarting the economies again. And back in 2008, when the financial crisis hit us, then the life science industry in Denmark was actually the only sector that was growing in terms of job creation and tax revenue, etc. And this is, of course, something that our politicians are aware of. And right now, there is a lot of things going on a national level in both Sweden and Denmark to help improve the conditions for the life science industry to grow. In Sweden, last year, a new strategy were launched, a national life science strategy were launched in December 2019. And in the beginning of this year, there has been a lot of work looking into how we can improve the framework conditions on policy making. But we have also seen, of course, restart packages that will help not only the life science industry, but all industries getting back on their feet again. We also see some partnerships being established between regional stakeholders within the field of life science that could work together with the national layer to implement the life science strategy. And there are now regional life science strategies on their way, for instance in Skåne, that could be helping also the implementation of the national one. In Denmark, there have been restart teams for all the most important sectors in the Danish economy. The life science industry, of course, is one of them. The restart team for life science and biotechnology was headed by the CEO of Novo Nordisk, and they just recently, a few weeks ago, filed their recommendations, both short-term recommendations as well as long-term recommendations on how to kickstart the life science industry again in this crisis. These recommendations will be fed into investments and export packages, but the long-term recommendations will also feed into a new life science strategy that is underway in Denmark. Looking a little bit more closely into how the life science sector has developed over the last year. One really good indication is to look at the life science export. And I'm really happy to say that the success for the life science exports in both Sweden and Denmark has continued over the last year. In 2019, Swedish and Danish life science export rose with 25% and more than that. Looking at how the life science export has developed over the past 10 years, you could clearly see the successes for Danish life science export by looking at the red line here. It's illustrating the Danish life science export from 2009 until 2019. And you can see that the Danish life science export has more than doubled in the last 10 years. The Swedish life science export has had a more modest growth rate, but as you can see also in the last couple of years, the life science export from Sweden to the rest of the world is picking up speed again, which is an indication of that life science is on the rise also in Sweden. Looking at the most important markets for Swedish and Danish life science, the US holds the #1 position as the biggest life science market for export of life science products and services from Sweden and Denmark. But the fastest growing market is actually China. And if we look at the annual growth rate in terms of how fast the export from Sweden and Denmark to China is growing over the past 10 years, we know that the annual growth rate has been more than 20% for both Sweden and Danish life science export. That is kind of fantastic. Another important indication of how the life sciences is doing is to look at tax contributions. And when we talk about tax contributions, we are talking about corporation taxes and income taxes from those working in the private life science sector. In 2018, which is the most recent numbers we have, we saw that the Danish life science industry contributed to the state and national finances in Denmark with almost 19 billion Danish crowns. In Sweden, the life science industry contributed with about 15 billion Swedish crowns. And this is a substantial contribution, especially in a time of crisis. Looking a little bit more about the development and how the tax revenue has developed over the last 8 to 10 years. Starting with Sweden, you could see that at least for the last 4 or 5 years, there has been a positive growth, a growth regarding the tax contributions from both corporation taxes and income taxes. And especially in 2018, the corporation taxes was seeing a record year in Swedish life science, which is also a really good indication of that Swedish life science is on its rise again. In Denmark, the development has been very positive, very stable. I won't say last year, but in 2018 we saw a drop compared to 2017, a slight drop, but that was still from very high levels. So I think the trend is very positive and it looks very good in terms of tax contributions. Switching over from a national point of view in Sweden and Denmark over to a more regional point of view. I guess it's too early to draw any conclusions of how well we're coping with the current COVID-19 situation. But what we know is that the science parks in the region, COBIS in Copenhagen, Medicon in Malmö, and Medicon Village in Lund, they're all adding new square meters to their facilities. So they're growing and expanding. We also see a growth in the number of small and innovative companies, which is really good. Many of them coming directly out from the universities. And this is of course also a really good sign that the knowledge created in the universities are not staying behind the universities' walls, but are creating new companies and new jobs eventually. And when we, in the work with the report, when we have talked to the local investors in this region, we have got some feedback from them saying that there is a growing interest also from the international investor community when it comes to the small biotech companies in the region. And this is of course good news, especially now when it's really hard to attract investments due to the traveling restrictions, etc. So this is something we need to utilize going forward, I think. But it's a good sign. Another indication of how things are going in Medicon Valley is of course also to look at the number of employees and how that develops. The number of employees in the private life science sector in Sweden and Denmark increased in 2018, which is also the latest figures we have. In Medicon Valley, the number of employees increased by almost 3% in 2018, and there are now more than 45,000 people working in the private life science sector in Medicon Valley. And this could of course be compared to the second largest life science cluster we have in the Nordics, Stockholm-Uppsala, where there is approximately 20,000 people working. But everything is not as good as it could be, of course. We know that the greater Copenhagen region in general is a growth engine for Swedish and Danish life science. But at the same time, we have seen as an effect of the COVID-19 new cross-border obstacles coming up as a result. Closed borders between Sweden and Denmark and the rest of the Nordic countries. The Nordic Council of Ministers estimated 34 new cross-border obstacles, whereas 9 of these are concerning Medicon Valley directly. And this is of course a big problem. I mean, we really need to utilize the strength and the dynamic force that we have in this cross-border region if we should continue to be that growth engine for Swedish and Danish economy. And we can simply not afford not to make use of that force here and now. So my suggestion to wrap up a little bit for the future, that would be, of course, to start to look into what we can do and how we can work together to solve some of these cross-border obstacles that are now stopping us from reaching our full potential. We also need to make sure that we could be even more attractive for clinical trials in the Nordic countries. I know that there is an initiative going on at the Nordic level, but why not start in Medicon Valley to see if we can find the keys on how to make that collaboration even better. I would also like to see a single and coordinated effort when it comes to international life science talents, venture capital, and how we can recruit investments to the region. And Copenhagen Capacity and Invest in Skåne, our local investment promotion offices, are doing a great job, but we need to help them all we can to support them in these difficult times. We need to make sure also that we can get a stronger collaboration between our universities in terms of pooling our resources to get more and develop more local life science talents and graduates. And then finally, I also think it's super important here and now to look into the national financing instruments to see how they can actually contribute to increase or stimulate cross-border collaborations now when we need it at most. Because the global pandemics doesn't care about regional borders. And then the funding shouldn't stop at the borders either. So I hope this is something we can come back to in the panel where we discuss the funding climate in the region. That was all for now, and over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Petter. It is really clear that we have a lot of really good things happening in Medicon Valley, but there are also things that we need to do to make the cluster even stronger than it is today. We'll actually like to ask you in the audience on your thoughts on Petter's 5 suggestions for a stronger Medicon Valley. So I'd like to encourage you to log in to Slido. You'll find it either on your right side of the screen, or if you have your video in full screen mode, you can also use another device, accessing slido.com, keying in the event code MVA20, or accessing it via the QR code in front of you. But our very first poll of the day, and the question is, what do you see as being the most important factors for a stronger cross-border collaboration in Medicon Valley? National resources to support cross-border partnerships in Medicon Valley, cross-border clinical research initiatives, including clinical trials, a coordinated effort to attract talent, capital, and investment, closer collaboration between the universities in the region on educational activities, and a well-integrated labor market. And of course, you can answer more than one factor, and we see that responses are already coming in. The most popular vote going to an integrated labor market, followed by resources. Oh, wait, that is changing now. We're seeing now an interest in having a much stronger coordinated effort to attract talent, capital, and investment to the region, followed by the labor market and national resources to support cross-border partnerships. We see that those two are moving. But Petter, as the results are coming in, I think that it's clear that there are 3 that seem to stand out. National resources, coordinated effort to attract talent, capital, investment, and a well-integrated labor market. What are your reflections on the results, Petter? Are they surprising to you?
I have to say I'm not surprised. I expect that some of those who are following us today are also commuters themselves, just like me. And of course, it's really frustrating seeing the sort of framework conditions on a regional level being changed overnight, although there might be good reason for it. But it's something that makes it really difficult for us trying to utilize the capacities and the expertise and the know-how we have in a good way. And this, of course, also stops some of the companies, especially on the Swedish side, recruiting key competences from Denmark that are necessary to grow their business, etc. This is at least what I hear when I talk to some of our member companies. So I'm not surprised about that. Looking into the interest in attracting talents, capital and investment, this is of course key to make the cluster as a whole continue to develop in a positive way. As I said before, I think Copenhagen Capacity and Investment Skåne are doing great. We have the Greater Copenhagen collaboration providing the brand, and Medicon Valley as a cluster within Greater Copenhagen is something we could use even more proactively. So I'm not surprised.
And I guess it reflects, as you said, Petter, this is a very real pain point that many are feeling today, given the result of the crisis. And in your presentation, you also touched on a number of longer-term cross-border obstacles that is kind of hindering Medicon Valley as a cluster from growing further. Which of those obstacles do you see as the biggest threat to the future of the cluster, and why?
I think the fact that the conditions are changing all the time, that's the biggest threat, to be honest. I mean, these kind of, the biotech companies, for instance, need stable framework conditions to grow. Because it's high risks, it's long development times involved, and risk is not good. And if something changes very rapidly that give you the condition, I mean, to grow, then we might end up in a situation where companies will actually leave the region, and that is certainly not a good thing, and this is not what we would like to see happen.
Absolutely. And I guess the one thing really special about Medicon Valley as well is that it's a transnational cluster, very much influenced by what's happening in Denmark and Sweden, even on a national level. And there are a number of life science processes going on a national level as well. What would be your one piece advice to the Danish and Swedish government and the decision makers when it comes to national life science strategies?
First of all, I think it's fantastic to see that both countries are gathering forces to support the life science industries in Sweden and Denmark. But I would like, of course, to invite also the national stakeholders involved to say that if they would like to see a Medicon Valley perspective in this strategy work, then we are always eager to provide that and discuss with you how Medicon Valley can add a positive angle to the life science strategies, and I'm sure we can.
Thank you so much, Petter. We're going to go into a number of interesting presentations that will shed more light on this. So thank you, Petter. We would like to move into our next session, where we're going to explore a bit further on what Petter was just addressing, the framework conditions for life science and innovation in Medicon Valley. And to help us address this, we have three really interesting speakers coming to provide this perspective from the outside and in. And our very first speaker for the session is Christian Kettles. He is a visiting executive at Harvard Business School and co-chair of the board of directors of Innovation Fund Denmark. And Christian brings a lot of experience with economic competitiveness and clusters with him. And Christian will speak on the topic, mobilizing the Øresund region for innovation, the case for life sciences. Over to you, Christian.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you, Petter, for inviting me to participate in this meeting. Unfortunately, only virtually this time, but I think this is a really great way to kind of bring us all together and discuss this region, which really always has been one of the model regions for cross-regional collaboration. Now, as Peter pointed out, life sciences is a critical cluster for the Øresund region. It's a very important economic driver for both the Swedish and the Danish economy. And as COVID has shown, it's an important key pillar of our societies that we need to look at and how to develop it moving forward. Now, what I want to do is to try to look a little bit at what we can learn, as Sarah said, looking from the outside in. And the starting point here that I've chosen is to really look at one of the most successful biopharma clusters in the world. Some of you might recognize the picture here on the screen. This is Cambridge. This is the Kendall Square area in Massachusetts. You see Boston downtown on the over across the Charles River, and this really has become one of the most dynamic places of biopharma research and innovation activity globally. Now, a lot of people will say, what you can learn from that region is you start out with a minimum of two world-class institutions, Harvard and MIT, and then you just wait for a long time and something great will happen. But actually, if you look at it in a bit more detail, you find out that the reality, even in the US, even in this place on the East Coast, has been somewhat different. If you go back in time, and it's really about 17 years and 2 months ago, there was something that was called the first Massachusetts Life Sciences Summit. So what was the situation at that point? Well, the situation was that there were these world-class research institutions, including the universities, but also MGH and BWH and others, so really leading hospitals in terms of healthcare practice. But there wasn't the amount of biopharmaceutical activity and innovation that we saw today. In fact, there was only one global pharmaceutical company that had their research headquarters globally in Cambridge. That was Novartis. And they came because their top researcher that they wanted to hire to lead their research center didn't want to move from Boston. But beyond that, there was a lot of opportunity and potential, but it hadn't really kind of coalesced around a really dynamic ecosystem. What changed after that day in September 2003 was that there was a coordinated effort to create intermediate organizations that try to figure out how can we organize ourselves in order to enable collaboration and change the business environment in that region in order to make sure that there is a pathway from world-class research and the availability of top talent towards real innovation in this industry. And this is exactly what has happened in the last 2 decades or so since then. So now all of the large global pharmaceutical companies are present in the region. There's hundreds of startups in the biotech community. There's a lot of venture capital. So there is this type of activity that you hope to see in a biotech cluster, but it didn't come out of nowhere. It was the result of determined collective action to really change the reality in that region. Now, if you look at the individual actions that were taken, none of them were rocket science. And actually, most of them you'd probably see either in the Øresund region or in other leading pharma regions around the world. But what made the difference is that there was a public-private coalition that came together and decided that they were going to analyze what exactly was missing in this region in order to make sure that especially startups and young companies could grow out of the academic environment and be kind of a fertile environment for them to grow and start. And then the big pharma companies would come to fill their innovation pipelines by collaborating and acquiring these type of new companies. So there was a whole portfolio of actions that came together with a very clear view on what the value proposition of this region was supposed to be. I think this is an important learning also for the Øresund region. You need a clear strategy. You need to then think about how you mobilize the forces that are there in different types of institutions in order to execute on that strategy. And it has to be centered around a key value proposition. Now, one of the pieces there was looking inside, but we also know that you need to look at the outside. And I think that's also an important factor to consider. The global innovation landscape is in the process of fundamental change. Innovation now is happening globally. It happens in very different places than before. Only 20 years ago or 15 years ago, innovation was really only happening in a few places in the Western world. Now we see it also in key hotspots in emerging industry. But while it's spreading out globally, it's still very concentrated in a few places. It's still the case that very few companies, the large multinationals, account for the majority of all spending on R&D. We have more resources going into innovation, but at the same time, innovation is getting more costly. So what we are seeing is this is an environment where there are huge opportunities. Our economies are becoming more knowledge and innovation intensive. But to win is getting increasingly hard. So you need to have a clear plan to figure out where you are going to contribute to that global system of innovation. That's true for innovation overall, but that's also true for life sciences. Now, one of these aspects is if you look at just the outcomes in terms of articles and publications, now there's a lot of data that we can use and look at that. And we kind of can be glad, and Peter kind of characterized this picture very well for the Øresund region, is that this is a region that actually stands high in the ranking of overall science and technology reasons. But if you look a little bit closer at the region, is that we're at the data, what you'll find is that we're strong, but we're small. There's a huge concentration of innovation activity in science and technology in a very few number of places around the world. So the top 10 regions here in this ranking that was recently done for the Global Innovation Index account for 1/4 of all patents and publications. The next 55 regions add another 25% of all patents and publications. So the distribution of innovation activity around the world is highly skewed. We need to remember that. We are strong, we are specialized in this region, but we're still a very small drop in the global ocean of innovation activity. That's true overall, but it's also true in biopharmaceuticals. Here you see some data from the OECD that's more focused on biopharma. Yes, we are very specialized. So this is, you see the red dots pretty high up, but the red dots are also small. So we have to recognize that for a global company, for an innovator that thinks about where to do biopharmaceutical research, obviously Øresund and the Nordics are an important location, but they're a small piece of a much broader global system. I think that's one of the key messages. We need to be much sharper, also in the Øresund region, about what's the value that we provide as part of a global innovation footprint that many of these large global pharmaceutical companies have. Now, what drives these outcomes is, of course, the broader innovation capacity that we see. And there's, again, quite a lot of data on this that really shows that both Denmark and Sweden, and also the Öresund region, if you take it together, the data rank very well on a lot of these indicators, particularly access to talent. The skill base is just very strong in this region. There's financial capacity as well. There are also large companies that can drive and bear this cluster moving forward. None of this has changed dramatically over the last couple of years, and it really explains why we are still quite high up there on these indicators. Now, one interesting data point on something that might be changing is if you look at the talent flows. And this is data that the OECD put together based really on the authorship of scientific articles. What you find is that over the last couple of decades, there has been an enormous shift, increasing, in the past, the picture was, and you see that in the light blue bars, that the top scientists in the world all went to the US. This was the most attractive place, the best research was done, and so it was able to attract and concentrate the best minds around them. That has changed somewhat over the last couple of years. On a global scale, you see that the OECD and the EU continues to lose researcher, even at a higher rate than in the past. The US is not as strong as a magnet, and this is before, the Trump effect kicked in. But the US is not as strong as it was there before. China, on the contrary, has been able to attract or, probably retract back many of its scientists to do research in China. Interestingly, both Denmark and Sweden have a positive balance in terms of being able to attract researchers to come into their institutions, to come back or attract foreigners to work on these regions. I think this is a very interesting asset, one thing that we need to build on even more as we move forward. Now, what's the policy system behind it? Because ultimately, these conditions that you see in terms of the business environment driving innovative capacity in biopharmaceuticals and other science and technology areas is driven by policy choices. I had a chance with a group of colleagues to look at the Danish system in more detail last year. And what we found was, unsurprisingly, a system that's very strong, that has a lot of assets, again, in the skill base and the research institutes, very strong universities and technical institutes, but also a bit of a fragmentation, a lack of strategic focus, and a focus on individual operational efficiency, but not clarity on how to achieve systemic transitions, something that is becoming more and more important as we think about the large challenges that we face as society in climate change, but also in other areas. It was also surprisingly inward-looking. Really surprising given the fact that the science system, of course, is very global by nature. Scientists from Denmark are active very globally, have connections to universities around it, but the policy system was very focused on the national conditions. Unfortunately, we lost the slide on Sweden here, but what you would see if you take a comparative look at Sweden is that Sweden has actually some potential strength in areas where Denmark is still behind. There is already an innovation agency with Vinnova, and we'll have the general director later on the program. There is a National Innovation Council, so there's the potential to create a much more systemic approach to innovation policy. There's also more experience, if you will, with systemic programs like the strategic innovation areas, and I think a sense that collaboration is really what's in the DNA of the Swedish innovation system. There's also a very strong startup community and more ability maybe to scale up these ideas, especially around the tech scene in Stockholm. At the same time, Sweden also has weaknesses in terms of what is the real value proposition of this country that has tremendous assets in innovation. What is it adding to the world also in biopharmaceuticals? What's the value proposition versus the political ambition that the country has in order to achieve or target specific factors? What you see from the combination of both Denmark and Sweden is that there is an opportunity really to gain from bringing the best of these two countries together. They are similar enough to be able to collaborate, but they are also different enough to actually gain from collaboration. Here are some thoughts then on what might be on the agenda if you think about how we can make a region that's already good, make it really great. How can we build on our healthcare systems, on the demand that we bring to the table to really integrate our scientific research into healthcare practice? How can we combine biotech and big pharma in a more effective way? There's a new initiative also that Medicon Valley Alliance has been engaged in. What can we do about growth capital, where we might still lagging behind some of the world-leading regions, not necessarily behind other European regions? And do we really have the right apparatus to work with the policy instruments for internationalization? But overall, I think the key question really is, what's the value proposition of the Öresund region in the global innovation system that underpins biopharmaceuticals? Unless we answer that question, it's very hard to come up with a comprehensive and convincing way forward. Now, as I said at the beginning, what really makes this region unique is its cross-border nature. This is a challenge, and I think we should acknowledge this as a challenge. And I think this the slide kind of maybe takes a somewhat too negative view on things. But of course, we had a period where this region was really enthusiastic about coming together. In the 1990s, after the Baltic countries opened up, then there was a bridge in 2000. There was the Baltic Sea region strategy by the European Union in 2009. So it was a period over the last couple of years where there was really a lot of high-level political attention on collaboration. But as Petter pointed out, it's not only the restrictions and connections with COVID. I think there's a general sense that the enthusiasm and energy spent, really also from a top-down level, on regional collaboration has waned. Not just between Denmark and Sweden, but more broadly in the Nordic countries. And I think that's one of the key questions that policymakers in both countries will have to address. Do they want to use the region as an instrument to make important policy investments? Do they want to collaborate? Or do they see the European level or the national level as the only geographic levels that count? What then about Medicon Valley Alliance? And here I think looking back at the research that I've done with a lot of colleagues on cluster organizations, I think what we find what really drives performance of these type of organizations is kind of performance on three different levels. First of all, it's about the context. You can't successfully drive a cluster organization if people don't want to collaborate, if there's no basis for doing that, if there are no assets. So that's a political choice, not by the Medicon Valley Alliance, but really by the political systems in both countries. Do we want to focus on this cross-border region as a key platform for policy action? Second issue is then, what's the ambition? What do we want to achieve with Medicon Valley Alliance as an organization? And there's no right or wrong here, but it's important to be clear about what the goal is. Do we want to have an organization that does a little bit of networking and connection and a little bit of lobbying, kind of being the voice of the region, the cross-border region? That's good and that's valuable. But maybe we can even go further. Maybe this can become much more of a platform where we do things jointly, will become a central instrument, a channel through which both countries can also collectively apply the resources, the funds that are available for research in this area, and use them in a coordinated fashion together. That's a much higher ambition, but it also has much higher potential rewards if we do it right. And then finally, obviously, it's also about how you do things. And Medicon Valley Alliance was also made a gold cluster, which means that it has passed kind of a European quality check. But it's important that you align the capabilities of this organization with the ambition that you have for its future success. Finally, we're back to COVID, but I think it's important to really think through what our strategic plan is, not only to deal with the short-term disruptions that come through COVID, but what it might mean for the more longer-term context in which also the Öresund region and the life sciences cluster in that region will operate. There are structural changes like accelerated digitalization that will also affect healthcare. There might be changes in the geopolitical system that can influence how the global innovation system might look like. There might be more demand for healthcare, but is there more or less money from at least the public sector to do that? That's unclear. Will the innovation spending go up and down? Again, that's not quite clear. There's a lot of evidence from past crises where initially there's a spike, but then you see resources being pulled back. So overall, I think there's huge opportunity here. This is an area that we'll need it for our societies, we'll need it for our economies. So interest is there, opportunities are there, but being successful in life sciences in the global innovation context is going to be more difficult in the past. I believe that Medicon Valley Alliance can play a very important role as a coordinating mechanism, as a way to coordinate our actions on the Danish side and on the Swedish side, for us to make sure that this region plays its role, the role that it can play in that global system. But it won't become easy, and it will need a strategy. With that, let me hand back to Sarah.
Thank you so much, Christian. You've given us a lot to think about through your presentation. And before we tap into your expertise a bit more, I think it could be worth also tapping into the minds of our audience to say, how do they view the cluster of Medicon Valley? So for those of you who are viewing this on our live stream, I would like to invite you once again to go into Slido. You see the QR code in front of you, or you can access it via slido.com through the event code MVA20. Or if you're viewing it in a minimized format, you see Slido just on the right-hand side of your screen. And the poll will be launched right now. And the question to the poll is, what do you see as being the strongest assets of Medicon Valley? And you can choose multiple options, but the options are talented workforce, leading researchers and research infrastructure, access to capital, access to healthcare data, strong innovation environment, and a good mix of SMEs and larger life science industry players. And we're seeing that so far, talented workforce seems to be the most popular choice, but that has now been at least temporarily beaten by the mix of SMEs and larger industry players, but still, those are two of the top options. Healthcare data and innovation environment is also pretty strong. Access to capital seems to be the weakest asset, at least in this poll right now. It'd be interesting to dive into that a little bit further. But it seems to land on a talented workforce and the mix of small, medium-sized enterprises and larger industry players. And Christian, given your experience with clusters, what are your reflections on the poll thus far for Medicon Valley? Does that reflect your view of the cluster, or do you agree that these are two assets that we can use to a larger extent?
I've shared here, but I think it's really good to see that people see this mix of SMEs and larger players as a key asset, because that's really what creates dynamism in a cluster. And maybe that's also then a bit of testament to the ability that Medicon Valley Alliance and others have had to bring these organizations together. Collective action is never easy. But it shows here that there's a huge opportunity to do that and leverage this mix of companies in the Öresund region for success.
And Christian, we're getting a lot of questions coming in through Slido right now, but I think one of them touches a bit on what you were mentioning at the beginning of your presentation on the success coming from the US cluster and the importance of a coordinated strategy. And you also mentioned that there's a challenge in having that in a cross-national cluster such as Medicon Valley. One of the questions is, how can we provide this push or this change to introduce new innovation or to spur innovation in a region? And what would be your advice to us, given that we have multiple agendas at play on creating this kind of coordinated view on how to move the region forward?
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have a silver bullet to do that. I think really it requires, at some level, also a top-down signal that this is what we want to see, and a signal from the policymakers that they understand we want to do this together. This is always hard, because as a Swedish politician, you're not getting any votes in Denmark and the other way around. So it requires leadership from both sides to say, yes, but we do that because we think overall this is better for all of us. even in the short term, that might mean that the FDI is going to Denmark, and that's harder to defend if you're a Swedish politician, or the other way around. But that willingness is required, and then I think the work for Medicon Valley Alliance and others has to start to make sure that we use that opportunity wisely and make sure that we actually do build a stronger cluster together.
Great. And just one last question for you, Christian. And I think this touches a bit about, how access to capital, it was the weakest factor in the poll. And we got a question from one of our speakers that were coming up later, Martina. And she asked, what impact has the investment of funds to create and sustain academic centers of excellence on innovation and commercialization?
No, I think definitely this is an important factor, and it's not just the one-time financing, but it's especially for the academic research. I think the question is more, how do you create an environment where you both give strong incentives for excellence and for high performance, but you also create sort of a planning horizon that enables the researchers to do something else rather than just go for the next grant. So kind of getting that balance right is what is important, and that sits in the details. There's no kind of high-level principle that solves this issue.
Great, thank you so much, Christian. And we will be welcoming you back later for our lounge discussion, where you will share a bit more insights even into the investment focus of today's event. So thank you so much, Christian. We'll come back to you shortly. So we'd now like to go into our next speaker for this session, and he is Enrique Alvarez Fernandez. He is the Managing Director and General Manager of Merck in Denmark. Enrique has extensive experience in working across a variety of international environments, providing vision and strategic guidance in context of high complexity, transformation, and competitiveness. And Enrique will present to us on the need to change the healthcare system for the benefit of patients and society. So welcome, Enrique.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm very happy to be here today. Let me check if I can see my slides now. Yeah, okay. I'd like to my gratitude to the Medicon Valley Alliance for inviting me today to talk about how we can continue to improve the Danish healthcare system for the benefit of the Danish patients and all. Go back one. Right. Okay. So let me say a few words about us. Merck is a vibrant company of specialists in healthcare, life science, and performance materials. We share a passion for science and a passion for technology. For more than 350 years, curiosity has been driven us to deliver excellence to patients and our customers and to imagine the future. As said, science is at the heart of everything we do. It drives the discoveries we make and the technologies we create. Our ideas are everywhere, from cancer therapies and laboratory tools to the display of your smartphones or the color of your car. We believe in science as a force for good, and Merck consists of 3 business units: healthcare, life science, and performance materials. Our first business unit is healthcare. Within healthcare, we are unique as one for patients to help create, improve, and prolong lives. With a holistic approach, we design and develop medicines and intelligent devices that provide ongoing care for patients beyond their treatment. Our is life science. We provide solutions to solve the toughest problems in life science in collaboration with the global scientific community. Our tools, services, and digital platforms empower scientists and engineers at every stage, helping deliver breakthrough therapies more quickly. This is of paramount importance, and now more than ever when we are in the middle of the pandemic. Our third business unit is performance materials. We are the world market and technology leader in liquid crystals and pearlescent pigments. In our ambition to advance display technologies, our product enable razor-sharp images in smartphones, laptops, flat-screen TVs, and tablet PCs around the world. As you can see, Merck is present in most of your homes and your daily lives. Our course was set by an inspiring pharmacist back in 1668. Today, we're a vibrant global science and technology company. To us, 350 years of Merck is about celebrating curiosity and the force that drives us to find answers to some of the greatest human questions and challenges us to imagine the next 350 years. Throughout our 350 years history, there is especially 5 landmark developments that I would like to share with you guys. In 1668, our founding partner, Father Friedrich Jacob Merck, established a pharmacy in Darmstadt that will go on and become a multinational research-based industrial company. In 2007, we acquired Serono, which was a biotechnology company deeply specialized developing pharmaceuticals in the field of reproductive health, neurology, growth, and metabolism. Today, this is the backbone of our healthcare portfolio. In 2010, we further acquired Millipore, making Merck one of the largest life science companies in the world with a specific focus on life science, lab materials, technologies, and services. In 2015, Merck also acquired Sigma Aldrich to focus even further on enhancing human health and safety. We manufacture and distribute more 250,000 chemicals, biochemicals, and water essential products. Short overview of Merck's key figures. Our 57,000 employees search for answers to some of the most pressing questions of the future. We believe in science and technology as a force for good, and that is what has driven our work since 1668. We are present in 66 countries, and sustainability is a key driver for our company and has been for many years. Therefore, we also be happy to be recognized as one of the most sustainable companies in the world by the Wall Street Journal very recently. Patients are at the center of our work, and with every advance, we are improving lives. This single ambition drives everything we do. Denmark is becoming of increasing importance for Merck, and that is also why we have stepped up our presence over the last few years. We have increased our R&D investments, and we have an ambition to continue to do so in the country. Our focus within R&D investments relates very specifically to do what we can for Danish patients. That is also why we are involved in a number of clinical trials within neurology and oncology. Furthermore, collaborating with hospitals, HCPs, and nurses is of key importance to us. That's also why we have dedicated many resources to engage with a number of public experts so we can jointly define how we can help Danish patients now and in the future. In Denmark, we have specifically built our focus on oncology, fertility, and thyroid disorders. At the same time, we will center our research and collaboration even more within oncology and immuno-oncology. Let's talk about the reality we are facing in the country. Today, we see that there are numerous challenges for the industry, both on a global level as well as in Denmark. As a global scientific and technology company, we are fully committed to be involved and solve them. When we look at the global trends and challenges, we believe that there are 5 key trends that we are facing now and in the near future. Of course, COVID-19. As the pandemic rages on, this is now our industry and the mankind first priority. And we all have to collaborate and be in the forefront of the fight to defeat the virus. Disruption and innovation. It's more clear than ever that those who are more linked to innovation will prevail in the long run. Thirdly, alternative healthcare delivery channels. The way healthcare providers support us has dramatically changed, and we all need to get used to it and also these new channels. Rise in healthcare costs and elderly populations. That is why cost efficiency is more important than ever. And this is not about price. This is about the return healthcare investment provide to our society at every level. Equally, when we look at the challenges we face in Denmark now and in the near future, we believe that there are five specifically challenges ahead of us. Firstly, framework conditions for R&D investments, for instance, clinical trials. We want to attract investment to the country, but we need to count on the right conditions in terms of response speed, required involvement of every stakeholder, fair costs, and innovation recognition. Medicine Council seems to be focused mainly on price. And as I said, we rather prefer to talk about cost efficiency, and we are wide open to have this discussion with decision makers and payers in an honest and transparent way. Public-private collaboration is challenged due to COVID-19, but we need to work together in not just maintaining, but strengthening our collaboration with public stakeholders for the benefit of our society. Expenses are rising in healthcare, and that is why it's so important to generate and launch as soon as possible innovative pricing models. But they are not yet broadly applied, and they should be based on cost efficiency analysis, and that need to be managed and understood by both the industry and decision makers. We are at a crucial moment in Denmark right now, and the government is currently drawing up a new life science strategy. This is significantly important as we have witnessed how our industry has become an increasingly key partner, not only in contributing to the development of the Danish economy, but also in providing solutions, help and assistance during the current COVID-19 crisis. Therefore, we have a great expectations and hope that the government will be focused on strengthening how we can improve the conditions for life science companies in Denmark. This is also a process that Merck Denmark has been very involved in, both in our direct dialogue with the Ministry of Business, but also in recent public hearings regarding the life science strategy. In Merck, we believe that the new life science strategy should focus on three key areas. Firstly, we believe we need to strengthen the framework condition for clinical trials. Secondly, we should establish a new forum for health and innovation with industry and public actors, where we can sit down together with public authorities and institutions and discuss the challenges that we are encountering, but also provide new solutions to further improve our healthcare system and how we can better recognize innovation in the country. Thirdly, we have seen that the collaboration between the industry and the 5 Danish regions will greatly benefit from being further improved. It has become difficult to engage hospitals and STPs, and furthermore, potential collaborations projects are often rejected for various reasons. We believe that we need to revisit the 5 regional agreements between the regions and the industry so we can further strengthen our cooperation for the benefit of the patients and the healthcare system. Therefore, to finish off, I would like to leave you all with one key takeaway. If there is one thing that I hope you will take away from my presentation, it is this. The life science sector in Denmark has a great potential, no doubt about it. But we should have more focus on strengthening the framework conditions for public-private partnership, R&D investments, and innovation recognition, for the benefit, of course, of the Danish patients and the healthcare system. We have a unique opportunity here, and now to do something about that with the current life science strategy process. So thank you for listening. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Enrique. And you mentioned earlier in your presentation that you have, as a company, been investing very much more into Denmark and into this region. Has there been some thoughts of why you're choosing to invest so much strongly in this region? Is there something special or some assets that makes it particularly attractive from Merck's perspective?
Absolutely, that's a really good question. In fact, we are very fortunate in Denmark. We count on a very, unique setup for the healthcare system. We have a tremendous and very skilled healthcare professionals. We have a really good opportunity to further collaborate on how to foster this collaboration, public-private, in order to maximize the setup we have in the country. And I can tell you, after living in 5 different countries, we have a really good framework to foster this collaboration in our country. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Enrique, for your presentation. And we would like to move to our third speaker for the session for today, and his name is Berkeley Vincent. He is the Managing Director for the Nordic Cluster for Janssen Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And Berkeley has a track record in strategic leadership within Janssen, and his most recent role as the VP for Customer and Digital Strategy has placed him in the forefront of topics such as advanced analytics and digital transformation for the pharmaceutical business. And Berkeley will talk to us today on digital transformation for commercial life science. What are the learnings for a post-COVID-19 world? Take it away, Berkeley.
So welcome, everybody. I hope you're keeping safe. I thought I would take a few minutes to explain a little bit of the perspectives that I hope I can share from some of the experiences that we've had as a company, but some professional experiences that I've had in the last couple of years around what digital transformation means for our industry and what, importantly, we need to do at this particular time, because I do think this is something of a once-in-a-career opportunity that we all face, and we really have to think about ways to take that challenge and turn it into an opportunity. So a little bit about me, and maybe even more importantly, a little bit about the company that I represent. So my name is Berkeley Vincent. As was stated, I'm the Managing Director for the Nordic Cluster for Janssen, which, if you're not familiar with Johnson & Johnson, is the pharmaceutical part of the business. Previously, I was responsible for digital transformation for that pharmaceutical business across all of Europe and Middle East. So I've spent quite a bit of time thinking about some of these topics and trying to bring digital transformation into our operations. You probably know some, but I think it's worth taking a moment to reflect on Johnson & Johnson in the Nordics. We are the largest and most broadly based healthcare company in the world, a fact that we're very proud of. But we also feel that we're quite broadly based here in the Nordics, and maybe not everybody appreciates how broadly based. So we have a pharmaceutical business, so a prescription business that we, at last estimates, think touches about 175,000 people in the Nordics every year, which is, of course, a very significant source of pride for us and what keeps us focused on moving forward with our portfolio. We are a very large investor in clinical trials in these parts of the world. We consider Sweden and Denmark both to be what we call core countries. And you can see that reflected in the numbers of clinical trials that we have ongoing. So that's a very significant fraction of the total clinical trial portfolio that the company has. We conduct in at least Sweden and often also Denmark. What you might be a little bit less familiar of is that through years of different mergers and acquisitions, but we are very proudly the owner and host of the Nicorette facility, of course, that great Swedish invention that is still such an important player in overall global smoking cessation efforts. And we're very happy to say our first carbon neutral manufacturing facility in the whole of the world sits in Helsingborg. So we're very, very proud of that. We also have surgical ophthalmologic surgery equipment being manufactured in Uppsala. And we do quite a bit of primary research in the consumer sector, also out of Helsingborg. So in total, we employ over 1,400 people in the Nordic region. And of course, you are hopefully aware of some of our consumer brands, but we also sell a very wide range of medical devices and our pharmaceuticals. So in looking around for some way to think about this very challenging time that we find ourselves on, I stumbled across this quote from Winston Churchill, who saw more than his fair share of crises as a leader. And he left, many very direct and pithy sayings, but this is one of his best, I think, which is to never waste a good crisis. And I think we can see that with the current situation only getting worse, unfortunately, as we go into the winter, that this is truly a crisis. This is first and foremost a very serious health crisis. But I think everybody on the call will anticipate that it is going to lead to a very significant economic crisis. And so the challenge is, how do we ensure that we don't let that go to waste? How do we ensure that we drive forward things that maybe have been around for a while, but we haven't given as much energy, we haven't given as much focus to as maybe we should have? And the other little thing that kind of caught my eye a little while ago, maybe you've seen it on your own LinkedIn feed, was this sort of tongue-in-cheek question about who leads the digital transformation, particularly in healthcare. We've been talking about some of these topics for a long time in healthcare, but was it in the end the chief executive officer or the chief technology officer who drove digital transformation in healthcare, or was it the virus? And I think that that's a very important point to reflect on, that what we face today in terms of what we need to do in terms of transformation is very technically capable, very technically feasible, right there in front of us, as it were. I'm coming to you today from the glory of my bedroom. I don't know which rooms and facilities up and down Sweden and Denmark I'm talking to you from, but all the technology that is required to make a meeting such as this happen has been in existence for at least 5 and maybe in some cases 10 years. But the behaviors weren't there. The need wasn't there. The drive wasn't there. And it's in that kind of sense that I want us to take a minute or two to reflect on what it means for healthcare when we talk about digital transformation. Because we have for many years talked about the fact that we have an aging population. We have for many years identified that we will have to become better at managing long-term chronic conditions as we put more and more effective medicines on the market and more people learn to live with their diseases. And increasingly, we've come to the conclusion that we're going to need to do all of that while managing an economic burden that was challenging before, and I dare to say might be even more challenging after COVID. And so what's, I think, really important, and I think in some respects really motivating about the opportunity in front of us, is that many of the tools, many of the behaviors, and many of the changes that we need to make are entirely obvious. They're entirely within our grasp. It is more than anything a question of behavior, a question of attitude, a question of desire to make the change happen. Because in the end, digital transformation is human transformation. So we have talked a lot in different aspects of our industries or in academia or in the biotech sector about making telemonitoring a reality, making clinical trials come to life in a completely new and more patient-friendly way, about ways to manage chronic diseases in a much more integrated way into patients' lives. And yet, in many respects, we haven't taken those opportunities all the way through. We haven't really delivered on many of the promises that we have identified and then failed to act against. And yet here it is. Here's that one big shock to the system that maybe we needed. Here's that push. Here is that opportunity to take the new behaviors that we are seeing being learned between caregivers and patients, between the industry and healthcare professionals, to move to new models of interaction, new ways to deliver information, new ways to capture data, all of it based on technology that we have to our disposal. We're not waiting for a new invention for this to happen. We simply need to get out there and make it happen. I'm happy to be able to say that our company has made progress on things like very large data collection through the Apple Watch in a partnership we have with Apple on heart failure. But I would say even in our own company, there are too many one-on-one examples of that, and not certainly across the whole sector enough holistic examples of ways that we really can bring this transformation to life, that we can use these tools for multiple positive benefits. First and foremost, for improving health outcomes. I think everybody on the call will recognize that more timely, more seamless, less friction-full monitoring of chronic patients is going to lead to better outcomes. So already we're getting to one of the triple aim. Patient experience is another area where I'm sad to say the health industry as a whole, and I include my own sector in this, has let ourselves a little bit fall behind. We see technology companies who are much more focused on reducing friction, solving issues of when one data system needs to talk to another, when one piece of a process needs to translate into another action. And here is a world-class opportunity for us to take that problem really seriously and bring those systems together and say once and for all, what is it going to take to make sure that one fantastically rich set of health data can talk to another? And finally, looking from the triple aim point of view and having a particular eye on the economic crisis to come, how can we use all of this to reduce cost? It has been conservatively estimated that 20% of healthcare expenditure is waste. And a significant portion of what can be standing for that waste can be described as an inability to share. We live in countries that have a fantastically rich history of collecting data sets. I don't need to convince anybody on this call of the history that exists around this level of data and the reason that we have very large collaborative projects with Karolinska and with many other academic facilities in these lands is because of that history. And yet we also see that many times those data sets are unconnected. They have very many challenges to being leveraged to their full effect. And that we as an industry actor collect our own sets of data, we have our own protocols, but we have not yet tapped into the opportunities to unleash the way that patients or customers, if we want to use that terminology from the digital world, can track their own data, can share and leverage their own data sets. So there's very many ways that we could lift up examples. I think they're probably familiar to most of us one way or the other, whether it's through voice capture pilots with the NHS, or it's through investment, as I said, in partnerships like Apple that we've made at a Johnson & Johnson enterprise level. But again, these are one-on-one projects. They're not a paradigm moving forward of stating that, you know, for healthcare to be truly sustainable in the 21st century, for all these great positive effects that we want to see of digital transformation to come forward, we have to take the sharing of data as one of the most fundamental challenges of our time. And if we really buy into the analogy that data is the new oil, well, then we need to take care for that natural resource that we have naturally accumulated in Sweden and Denmark, a little bit like the way our brothers and sisters across in Norway have taken care of their natural resource. We have to treasure it, but we also have to invest in it, and we have to maximize its impact. And I see in this collaboration between small, very well organized, very structured countries, great potential to do things around the impact that data can have, not just for the patients and customers that exist in our 4 countries, but much broader still. Because finally, what I can see is an opportunity to reframe, an opportunity to re-engage, and ultimately an opportunity to get to the side of healthcare that we have been talking about for a long time, but for many reasons, some of them good, some of them less good, we haven't managed to get there. So here we have a really terrible crisis, terrible at the individual level, terrible at the human level, putting our healthcare systems under strain, but also giving us the signals that this change can be made. We can do these things. It is, in essence, much more about attitude and behavior than anything about the underpinning of the technologies. And if we have the right level of energy and commitment to it, we are going to come out of this crisis not only stronger in the short term, but with a better and stronger idea for what success looks like for the medium term, of meeting that triple aim of improving the health of populations, of optimizing care, and crucially, for greatly enhancing the individual lived experience of everybody who has a disease or a sickness or simply wants to manage their own health actively. So I hope that that gives you a little bit of a taste of where we as a company are thinking. I hope also I can join with many of you through the virtual coffee breaks and offline to talk about how we can come together to make more of that effect real around these countries. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you so much, Berkeley. And as you rightly pointed out, we are living in the time of digital transformation with its own quirks and all. And you pointed out in your presentation that COVID-19 has been, the single most important driver of the digital transformation that we're seeing today with telemonitoring and digital health. But at the same time, I'm hearing a discussion on the question of how much is this digitalization a band-aid or rather a stopgap, solution to help us survive this current crisis, and how much it's truly transformational. And it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on how much do you think will remain in the post-COVID-19 world, and what will it take for this digital transformation to be sustainable for the long run?
It's a great question. I think first and foremost, it's up to us to decide how much of this really deeply sticks, as it were, how much it embeds. I think that we have benefited from a model in the past of investing very much in physical facilities, in staff, in large amounts of capital expenditure, which has given very high quality healthcare to many, many people in these countries. And the question now that comes to all of us in all of the sectors is, how do we bring the same level of investment and energy into managing people in a different way, maybe using their phone, maybe using their smart device, but even more importantly, how we share the data in the background and how we leverage the insights that gives us a health system that is affordable, that gives us a health system that continues to offer really great health benefits for people into the future. And it's not clear at all to me that unless we make those big changes, unless we embrace a very radical blended future of physical and digital services, whether we can actually manage to keep this great level of healthcare that we've come accustomed to over the last 40 or 50 years.
So what I'm hearing, the key takeaway is that digitalization must become part of our shared vision for the future in whichever organization we come from. Thank you so much, Berkeley, for the very good insights. So for our live audience, we're now going to take a break, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here at 2:15, where we're going to go into our next session touching on investments. And if you were here earlier in the program, we talked about how access to capital might be a bit challenging in Medicon Valley, and we hope that our speakers will provide a really interesting perspective to that question. So have a cup of coffee or tea, and I'll see you back here at 2:15. Hello, everyone. Welcome back from the break. Welcome as well to those of you who are joining us for the first time and jumping into this session. We are now going to take a closer look at investments in life science in this region, and we know that that has become increasingly focused these days with the COVID-19 crisis and the need to be more prepared for such challenges in the future. And once again, we're going to have speakers and presentations, and you have the opportunity to ask questions through Slido. And you'll see on the screen the QR code to access Slido. You can also go into slido.com and put in the event code MVA20. And for those of you who are viewing it in a minimized screen format, you also have Slido right of your screen. Then you can type in your questions directly. So we have a number of exciting presentations coming up, as well as a panel discussion. And it's my pleasure to invite our very first speaker for this session, Anne-Marie Levy Rasmussen. She is the CEO of Innovation Fund Denmark. And Anne-Marie has extensive experience from both universities and industry and has deep insights into political processes. Anne-Marie has since 2007 also held management positions at GSK in Denmark, London, and most recently at the company's headquarters for vaccines in Belgium. And Anne-Marie will share with us on the topic of funding opportunities for innovation in life science, new partnerships in the ecosystem. Take it away, Anne-Marie.
Thank you. And first of all, hello, everyone. I hope you're sitting comfortable by your screen. And, I'm hoping to project a little energy, even though it's through the screen. Also, thank you for that introduction. It's true. I have a background also in pharma, so I actually attend a lot of these meetings in some of my old roles. So it's wonderful to be back, and thank you for inviting me. I think it's a really important topic, and thank you for helping facilitate and drive this discussion. So my role here today is to share a bit about Innovation Fund Denmark. I'm quite sure you are familiar with it, but nonetheless, I think we're just going to quickly touch upon that, and then we can kind of go to the more forward-looking part of the agenda, and also the discussion afterwards around what are the opportunities that we see going forward. So, for Innovation Fund, we have a raison d'être, or a kind of a DNA, that we invest in entrepreneurs, researchers, and business that create value for Denmark. We have kind of a dual mission. It's both around creating value for Denmark, i.e. job places and growth, but also develop solutions to the big challenges that we're facing, not only in Denmark, but also globally. I think if you sum it up, I think mainly we want to increase the global competitiveness of companies from Denmark, but also from probably our regional area, if I can say so, now that we are in MVA. Now, if you're thinking, so what about the Innovation Fund Denmark, and how does that fit with the Growth Fund? And we have a lot of private foundations also in Denmark who are very actively investing in good ideas and talents in Denmark. So there's a whole ecosystem in Denmark that is also quite relevant for the pharmaceutical biotech industry. So we are what we call soft funding, i.e. we invest in projects, we invest in people, but as you see in the kind of value chain, there's other players that help facilitate and grow companies along the financial value chain. So we play a quite important role in this we are the only state-funded, government-funded component in the financial value chain that connects universities, researchers with the private companies. There's a lot of private foundations who do the same, but we're the only public one, and we have a very close collaboration with the Growth Fund. We call it actually our sister foundation. So it's a natural thing because they kind of have the hard money. So I think it's a good way of doing it. Now, just quickly on the numbers. So Innovation Fund was established in 2014, where the government chose to merge 3 public foundations and kind of research councils and establish this one entry into the innovation funded mechanism for the state. And I think there's a lot of things to be proud of, specifically 2 flagship programs that I think a lot of the MBA members know of, which is Grant Solutions and InnoBooster. But mainly you can see here we have a quite big portfolio, an active portfolio. Those are a bit old numbers, so we are more than 7 billion Danish kroner right now. We are kind of, our success is, we are becoming, I'm proud to say, more and more successful in the sense that we play a more and more important role in driving the innovation and help the companies. So we are up around 4,000 applications every year for the foundation. We have 2,500 active investments. A big chunk also on international collaborations, almost more than 500. This year is a historical year for the foundation. We are gonna, in our investment levels is 2.4 billion Danish kroner. And then also it's again this one, we would say agile and user-friendly access. Now, these are the programs, and basically we have two type of mechanism, two entry points for our customers. And now I use the words customers specifically because that's how we view you. So companies, researchers, startups, and so on, those are our customers, and it's our job to help them succeed, but also kind of materialize what dreams they have. We have programs that are focused around partnerships. So that's where companies, multiple companies, maybe in Denmark, maybe Sweden, they go together with researchers and so on, and have a collaborative project that we invest in. We also have more one-to-one projects where we invest in a company, in a startup, in a project. So there's these two type of things. I just want to quickly move to this one. Now, I mean, you already know this. We have a quite strong pharma, biotech, healthcare industry in Denmark and in this region and part of the world. So, and also this is reflected in the investments that the Innovation Fund Denmark has done over the years. We recently, in April this year, the board approved a new strategy for the foundation for the next 5 years. As part of the strategic process, we did kind of an analysis of our portfolio. For sure, we're very strong in I would say the healthcare, biotech, life science component, which we think is natural given the strength, but also in the related, I could say, academic environment in terms of natural sciences, health science, and engineering. And of course, it's being an industry that's a main contributor not only to growth and workplaces in Denmark, but also to the national gross product and so on. It's a big component of the export. We're going to come back to that because I think the internationalization that I heard a couple of times today, I think it's a key driver to increase the potential even more. Now, I just wanted to quickly show everyone our new strategy. So it's also on our website and you can find more information around this. But basically, our strategy is built upon the successful foundation from the beginning of the establishment of the Innovation Fund Denmark, but also, I think, in a very, I think in an effective manner, encapsulates also some of the observation points that were done in the international evaluation of the Innovation Fund. We got an evaluation, I think 1.5 years ago. I'm quite sure you guys also contributed to that one. And that also shown that we were very successful, but we also needed to step up in terms of our role in the innovation system, in the ecosystem. So one of the main things we're going to focus on also going forward in our new strategy period is how are we going to help leverage the full potential of the Danish innovation system. It has very strong individual components. However, we need even further to increase the collaboration and the collaboration and the connectivity in the ecosystem. And one of the key elements also in our new strategy is around internationalization. And it's because I think for us, it's around driving the global competitiveness of Danish companies. It's around developing Danish solutions to global issues. And when I say this, I realize I'm sounding like it's almost very nationalistic. That's not the point, because it's a global. It's a global society, it's global challenges and so on. And therefore, as part of our new strategy, we're also going to look at how can we be even better at attracting the right, talented people, or like the talented startups to Denmark. How can we help the universities also succeed in kind of a global competition? I think also, because mainly when you look at this region, whether you say Denmark, Sweden, and so on, it's teeny, tiny. When you look at the number of patents we do, how much of the knowledge, of the global knowledge we produce, and so on, to be honest, it's nothing. So we can only be successful if we look at things in an international mindset. I can give you another kind of more, you can call it more blunt, or I hope not. I don't mean to be blunt, but how we think about this is that why would we spend our money investing in a Danish company for that company to be able to take market shares from another Danish company in Denmark? Who cares? I mean, it doesn't really change anyway. It doesn't grow the society overall. I think the other piece around the international component is the international mindset. So we have a big strategic point around developing more academic entrepreneurs. I also want to mention we would like to increase the number of female entrepreneurs and female project leaders, because we can see in our current portfolio that's a quite low number. So we need to balance the diversity, I think, and work on that. But the piece around the startup is that it's wonderful if you can start up a new company in Denmark and only succeed in Denmark. It's wonderful you can create some job places. But what we really want is company who maybe start up in Denmark. It's the home market. But I think quite soon after that, think about what's the next step? What's the international plan? Where's my next market I want to go to? Is it Europe? Is it outside Europe? What do I want to do? And how can we, as an innovation fund, help those startups succeed? I think every big company, every big success inside also big companies, it starts with one or few people. I can testify that from GSK. Some of the big brands that were developed in GSK, it starts in the lab somewhere, and it's one or few people. So for us, it's around developing talent, supporting talent, and also ultimately, I hope, help people, I would say, realize their full potential and make dreams come true. I know it's a bit fluffy, but nonetheless, I wanted to start or finish on that kind of soft point.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Anne-Marie. I think that's a great, inspiring way to end your presentation. And I love it that you spent time, talking about your strategy, 4 pillars, and 2 of them touch on internationalization and the need to develop a talent base. And we know there's a global competition for talent. I mean, it's no longer local, but global. Yeah. And Medicon Valley is a functional region. We have a lot of commuters from Sweden working in Denmark. How do you see that contributing to this strategy, internationalization and talent?
But I mean, for sure, there's a big potential because you have a lot of the main components that would allow us all to be successful in this area, which is you have really, really competitive, strong companies within pharma, biotech, healthcare. You have really good, we have some of the best researchers in the world in certain areas. We have a strong ecosystem. And I think if you look at least in kind of this globalization or specifically for healthcare pharma, it's quite mobile money. So when you look at it from an investment point of view, okay, when you look forward in your long-range forecast, of course, you are going to look at US, you're going to look at China, but you also need to secure your chain. you know, your kind of portfolio. You need to develop new drugs, new assets, new technologies, and so on. I think we have a quite good value proposition to be a player in this area. So for sure, I think there's a lot to be said, and also a lot to be said around organizations as MVA who play a role in helping everyone to understand what is the potential there.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anne-Marie, and your presentation will be available to everyone as well, so have a look after this event. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. We'd like to move to our next speaker for the session. And we're going to have Darja Isaksson, Director General at Vinnova, which is Sweden's innovation agency. And Darja is a member of the Swedish government's Digital Advisory Council and was previously a member of the Swedish Government Innovation Council. Darja herself is the founder of 2 successful digital agencies, so she's living or walking the talk. And the title of Darja's presentation is "We Need System Innovation in Life Science and Society as a Whole. But How?" Take it away, Darja.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's great to be here. And I think that we've already heard so many things that I would agree on completely. So I'm looking forward for maybe some questions later on. But let me begin here then. And do you see my presentation now?
Yeah. Yes, we do.
Okay. So, I mean, Sweden, Denmark, all the Nordics share some common challenges with a large portion of the world. The super good news is that we're living longer lives. It's challenging, however, simply because with those longer lives come other things, such as increased prevalence of cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, metabolic diseases, and increased costs of healthcare. And we're well aware that that's a challenge that we all share. At the same time, the advances in life sciences are so enormous that, you know, therapies that would have been unfathomable just 10 years ago are now becoming real, be it through early detection, individualized and effective treatment that we can scale in a way that we couldn't possibly have done before. We have gene editing, super resolution microscopy, AI-assisted pathology, and more. However, one of the things we also need to address is simply our ability to innovate on those technologies and implement them at scale in our system. This also pulls us towards the other insight that we have some other drivers in society. So people who learn more about individual risks, people who understand that they can expect longer lifespans, people increase their expectations of mental well-being. All those types of expectations also drive cost, as well as these new therapies that we can apply. That means that modern welfare states and healthcare today must be even more effective, but that will not suffice to, have a sustainable and a good development in our countries. This equation actually requires us to have a more healthy population than before. And to be able to accomplish that, we also need to increase our ability to address health in a more preventive way. Just to put it bluntly, we need to decrease the number of people with diseases that we can prevent through lifestyle, what we eat, how we exercise, how we move around in our cities, etc. So we really badly need effective systems approaches in order to really develop our welfare states and to make the most use of all the opportunities we have right now at our disposal. So I think that from what I'm saying now, this is kind of familiar to the entire audience. And I also expect that these are some of the challenges that we're well aware that we face in making this happen. The innovations available within life science, digitalization, and healthcare all challenge policy, be it different approval criteria, reimbursement models that have not least come into bear with the COVID pandemic, incentives and opportunities for clinical trials in our countries, regulations in regards to data and governance of data are all coming into bear, and our ability to address those. Data in itself. So as Nordic countries, we pride ourselves in the quality of our data, in the long-term series that we have, but it really needs to be available to in the right way, addressing ethical needs, but also be available to the right actors at the right time. That requires governance, that requires standards, that requires digital infrastructure, and more. For us to be able to make use of all this in practice, we need to develop how we coordinate ourselves between, not least in relation to prevention, between national, regional, and local, between public and private. We understand that we need to be through innovation, through policy incentives, and other things. We need to be addressing both supply of treatment and innovations and demand and behavioral changes. And then to be able to do that and more, we have the challenge of having the right competencies in academia, in the innovation ecosystem, in our country, in our companies, within our healthcare and elderly care, and not least within government, where we're supposed to drive some of the coordination and opportunities out there for all of our companies. And then, not the least, in order to be, as we heard before, competitive, we need to have this international mindset from the very beginning. There is really no real success within a country such as Sweden or Denmark in itself. It's about the global game. So we need to be able to scale in a competitive way. So let me just say a few words about the kind of resources that Sweden brings to this. For instance, we have the Swedish government set up a strategic program for life science, which gathers both funders, industry leaders, SME representatives, relevant government agencies in order to make common strategic priorities. So there is a national life science strategy in place today. There are also resources that we see have opportunities that we can leverage even more, not least, for instance, within basic science. So within the greater Copenhagen region, we have ESS and MAX4, which is big science facilities that enables an increasing knowledge about our fundamental biology. That's research infrastructure that will provide valuable opportunities for life science industry. So it's already doing so, but I believe that we can do more. This is an area where our countries are already collaborating, and I hope that we can do more. In Sweden, we see industry also taking a large responsibility, and not least in funding the necessary research and innovation. So here's one quite recent example from the private foundation, Knut and Alice Wallenberg Foundation, which recently launched an effort within data-driven life science in the scale of 3.4 billion kroner for the next upcoming year. And this is a complementary effort also in relation to their previous effort on AI in general, which will also have a big impact and create opportunities within life science and health tech. As an innovation funder, Vinnova, since before, together with 2 other agencies, have funded 17 12-year strategic innovation programs, 2 of which address challenges and opportunities within life science and healthcare. SweLife is one of them. And they create opportunities for SMEs to get access to co-creation and collaboration with academia and industry in various ways. So those resources are already in place. You can look at another more recent initiative also called CAMP. It's part of a 32 million euro commitment of the Swedish government for advanced biological medicines, where Vinnova fund this effort to have a focus on the science and technology required for advanced biological therapies from lab to clinic, including bioprocess development, GMP production, and logistics. And this is a collaboration that drives collaboration between researchers, GMP competent resources, industries, and hospitals. And there are also a number of other examples I'd like to highlight, such as the Genomic Medicine Sweden structure, which is actually a national resource within clinical genomics that provides an infrastructure and a collaboration infrastructure that services all of our country and could actually for sure be made of more international use as well. And there are also what we'd call innovation infrastructures. Here's just one example. And we have more of those. Testa Center, which is a testbed for production of biological products. So this facility is set up specifically to help SMEs get access to this kind of production facility to be able to shorten the time to find your product market fit, to get access to your first customer, to learn more about how your innovative idea can actually be put to an international market and scale in a shorter time frame and with more effective investments. And there are more opportunities for us to develop together. For instance, there was recently this recommendation for government to suggest an strategic innovation program for welfare technologies, many of which we know will not only improve life quality for people who use them, but also through data capture, provide opportunities for early detection and more efficient treatment as well. So let me finalize by commenting and I guess reflecting on some of the things that we share in perspective that we heard the previous speaker talk about. With 10 million people, Sweden, and if we add Denmark, from a global perspective, we're not countries, we're cities. And that means that we need to have that kind of mindset. We really do the best we can to help ourselves both get the solutions we need, the competitive power that we can gain for ourselves, and also the relevance to the world of having an impact on real, urgent societal challenges by having this mindset from the very beginning. Work together within talent attraction, strategically using our common resources in terms of research infrastructure, innovation infrastructure, talent attraction, and more. Because to be honest, the game is not about Sweden or Denmark. It's about the kind of impact and opportunities we can create for the world. And I think that there are a couple of areas where we're then, and we can dig into that deeper, I hope, but where we can do more together. So as I mentioned, there are policy perspectives that are very important for us to work together on, not least because we're all part of the EU. There's infrastructure that is expensive, but we need to make the most out of it. And the more we work together on that, strategically choosing resources and pulling together, the more value it will have for all of us. And we need to work together in the ecosystems. It has to do with talent attraction. It has to do with creating opportunities for our companies in a globally competitive world. So the more we can shine the light on the resources together and create opportunities for all of our companies, the better it will be for us all. So that would be my final remark. And I'm very, very happy about this event and to be part of it, because I just see that Medicon Valley Alliance is an important resource in this work.
Thank you so much, Daria, for the kind words. And thank you so much for your presentation. And I like that you said that Denmark and Sweden, from a global perspective, we are but cities. And I think it's something that Anne-Marie also mentioned. We are small. Christian Kettles at the beginning of the event said that we are strong but small. So there is a common red thread here. And, if we start to make it concrete, and we start with Denmark and Sweden, can you identify, you listed a number of areas of opportunity, but is there one area where you think we should start collaborating more strongly today that is most feasible and would create the most impact? What are your thoughts there?
No, but I really want to highlight three things. So from one, I mentioned that we should be adamant to strengthen our ability to create synergies in funding of research and investments into research infrastructure. So ESS and Max4 is a good. We're already well on our way. Novo Nordisk co-funded Micromax before. The Halos collaboration that we have, I think would not have been possible otherwise. So that's one. The second is creating opportunities for talent attraction and competitiveness for our startups. And that has to do with strengthening the ecosystem. It also has to do with providing the type of innovation infrastructure, such as Testa Center, to all of these companies. So I think in the Health Tech Nordic is already doing that, like a great job at shining a light to the resources we have here for an international audience, attracting capital and talent. And I think that's something that we really need to continue to strengthen. So those are the two things that I would like to mention primarily. But we can't be successful unless we also pull together on the policy aspects.
Great, Daria. And Medicon Valley is part of two main regions, you would say, Copenhagen in Denmark and Skåne in Sweden. And, just some reflections on what do you think are the specific opportunities and challenges for a region like Skåne that is, far away from the capital, the economic center of gravity in Sweden, but right next to another capital in a neighboring country, which we are partnering with, but also somewhat competitors with, but within the same region. How, what do you see the challenges and opportunities with that setup?
From a personal perspective, I grew up in northern Sweden. So if I would ask you all how you think about the competitiveness between Luleå and Umeå, I think that you would be, slightly not so interested. I also lived 8 years in Malmö and 12 years in Stockholm. Let me just put it this way. Competition in life science and health tech is global. This is not about, the real competition should be Boston, San Francisco, UK, Switzerland, China. The location of economic centers such as Greater Copenhagen and Stockholm, they're close enough. It's not an issue. And I think that's the mindset we really need to have.
Yeah.
And I think that actually I see leaders that I think most of us already share that mindset. As I mentioned, I think the Halos collaboration could only have happened due to leaders with that mindset. That's a collaboration between you, Medicon Valley Alliance, universities in Denmark, Sweden, and Germany, understanding that together we can create bigger opportunities in the world. And that's what matters.
Fantastic. I think that's a really great final point to leave your presentation on. And we'll come back to you, Daria, during the lounge discussion. But thank you once again for now. Before we go into the lounge discussion, I think it's worth to take a pause and take the temperature of our virtual conference room and get a sense of what our live attendees are feeling when it comes to the investment climate in the region. So we're shortly going to launch a poll, and I'd like to encourage all our online attendees to log into slido.com, enter in the event code MVA20. You can access it via the QR code as well, or it might be located on the right side of your screen if you have the stream on minimized mode. And so the poll is asking this: rate the current funding climate in Medicon Valley from a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is poor and 5 is excellent. So rate your perspective on how strong the current funding climate is in the region, 1 being poor and 5 being excellent. So far, we are right in the middle at 3. We are neither poor nor excellent. We're almost average. But let's see if more responses come in. Still majority going for a rating of 3. We are right in the middle. And this is an interesting result given that at the beginning of our conference, we also asked if access to capital was one of our strong assets in Medicon Valley region, and that ranked poorly. So there's something to be said about these results. And I think our lounge and our panelists will reflect even more on this. And I'd like to invite Søren Bregenholt, who will moderate this part of the session. Søren is a familiar face to many of us watching. He is the Chief Executive Officer in Macrophage Pharma, and he's also the Chairman of the Board at Medicon Valley Alliance. Søren has held a number of management positions in Danish pharma and biotech, including Corporate Vice President at Novo Nordisk, Chief Operating Officer in Symphogen, and most recently, Chief Business Officer in IO Biotech. And so Søren, take it away and lead us into a great panel discussion with Christian Kettles, Amanda Hayward, and Daria Isaksen.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure, and welcome again to Christian, who rejoined. And for those of you who were not part of the Christian's session, Christian talked a lot about biotech clusters, talking about the value proposition, sort of the current purpose, and especially how Denmark and Sweden could potentially collaborate as being two countries, or maybe 2 cities, if we follow Darius' logic, that were sufficiently similar to collaborate and yet sufficiently different to actually benefit and complement each other. So a polling of less than 2.5. Biotech is a capital-heavy industry, and maybe that is it's not so unexpected that we get an answer below 2.5, given that take. So Christian, I want to start out the panel discussion with you. So you started out talking very much about Boston, Cambridge, and the ecosystem around Kendall Square. If we're going to widen that perspective, could you maybe talk a little bit about what other clusters should we look at on a global level, and what is the reason why?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, Daria already talked about some of those other key hotspots of innovation that are relevant. I think there are increasing places, of course, in Asia. There are other places in Europe, certainly in the UK, unfortunately no longer in the European Union, also Switzerland. So I think we know what the hotspots of biopharma research and innovation are at the moment. I actually would like to turn it back more to the question on what's unique about us. And if I say us now, the Eurozone region, I think that's the question that we need to answer, and not so much just in a winner takes it all competition with these other locations, but much more in the sense of complementarity. Because I think that also came out of the presentations that the other speakers from the pharma industry gave. That they look at their global footprint, and so the question is, what are they going to find here that can complement what they find in these other locations where they're already active?
Yeah, and you sit as vice chairman also at the Innovation Fund Denmark, and then let me turn it back to you. From your perspective, there, what is unique about the region?
Well, I do think, obviously, we talked about some of the assets that we have in terms of our talent base and the people that are here. Also, Daya talked about the physical infrastructure, research infrastructure that has been created. I think at least potentially unique close collaboration between the private sector and the public sector should be an asset that we can leverage. For example, the whole issue around data, and that was coming up in one of the presentations as well. We have really unique data registries on all of our citizens in the Nordic countries. How we can leverage that more, I think, is a key issue where we could differentiate ourselves more. Overall, I think integration of biopharmaceutical research with healthcare delivery, where we have a strong system, and we really can make sure that we not only have the knowledge around a specific medical product, but really think more about the whole value chain of healthcare delivery. I think that's another area where we could potentially do more than are doing.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in your talk, you talked about sort of the more or less structured process leading from 2003 and onwards with a number of network or otherwise mandated organization in Boston like Mass Bio and Mass Clinical. Maybe you can talk a little bit about their sort of official mandate, how they operated and integrated with the political decision makers in that period.
Yeah, obviously, I think that's very much shaped by the U.S. context, which I think we generally see as much more private sector driven, government not doing quite as much. Not so true necessarily in biopharma, given the huge role that NIH, the National Institute of Health, plays in terms of funding. But the specific situation here in Massachusetts was that after a lot of back and forth, but ultimately the government said, we are going to provide quite a lot of money. It was $1 billion over a 10-year period in capital investment funding. So that could be made available. But then it was a private sector-led kind of blue ribbon commission of leaders from the industry that said, okay, so how are we going to deploy this? And how is this going to attract further investment from the private sector and the universities to make sure this works? So I think it was important that there was the top-down, if you will, political support. We are going to support this. This is an important area, and here's also capital. We're going to be willing to and make our public instruments available. But then very strongly having the academic and private sector community kind of set the more specific action steps on how that money could be deployed most effectively to really change the opportunities that companies and researchers had in the region.
Okay. Thank you, Christian. And we will probably get back to a couple of those questions with Daya later. But if we turn to you, Amanda, it's good seeing you again, albeit virtually here. You have a strong international career, and you sort of lead your business in another of those biotech hub in the Bay Area, and you have also been involved or still are involved in companies in one of the other hubs in Middle Europe. So working in that international environment, multinational environment, how do we, and now you have to be frank with us, how is Nordic life science really seen out there in the big wide world? What is our reputation?
That's a great question. Well, I think Nordic science actually has a great reputation, and that's obviously something that we're looking to build on at IR Ventures. But maybe I'll just comment a little bit on sort of how I got to be so involved in the Nordic region. So I was a partner at Baxalta Ventures, based in Kendall Square in Cambridge, and as part of that, we were looking to put an accelerator together of very the most innovative technology we could find, and invest in that together with the Mayo Clinic and some other investors here in the US. And what we found is that the level when we were sourcing globally, and we found the level of innovation that we were able to identify in the Nordic region actually outstripped a number of the opportunities that we were looking at in the US. And so we actually developed at that point a very strong relationship with Novo Seeds, which is how I got to know Stefan so well, and actually sort of lasered in on looking to do targeted investments as a pharma company strategic fund in the Nordic region. And then sort of moving to one of my other recent roles, which is head of business development for an East Coast-based venture-backed company developing technologies for rare diseases. Our first deal that we did at that company was actually with a venture-backed company in Tromsø, Norway, Profilix, and that's our lead program that we're looking to take into the clinic right now. And we are very focused, actually, right now as a company in sourcing technologies in the Nordics, actually more so than any other region in Europe. And I think others are catching up with this mindset too. And I think when I talk to other venture investors here in the US and others in the business development community in pharma and biotech, there is a strong both respect for the innovation coming out of the Nordic region, but then actually a focus on looking to see how we can do a better job in accessing that innovation and helping to support it. So long answer, but I think the Nordic region is doing very well in terms of innovation and that is being recognized worldwide.
That's great, and there's something to build on. and you talked about your allocation of funds for the early part of the innovation chain, spinning out companies from the university. But actually, I want to ask you another question, and maybe that's a little bit unfair, but that's in the other end of sort of the funding life cycle of a company. Now we again saw a Danish company, Galecto, listing in the US, and over the last couple of months, there's been other big Danish tech companies listing in the US. Could you sort of, from your outside-in perspective, maybe talk a little bit about why you think, what do we need to really change in the Nordic setup to ensure that we keep these companies in Denmark and Sweden also when they need significant growth capital?
So, Søren, is your question more on keeping the companies in the Nordics or on accessing that international capital?
Yeah, but maybe it's both of them.
Well, you know, it's very much an international world, literally now for biotech, and I think actually perhaps now, particularly within this sort of COVID environment, we're realizing that not everybody has to be in the same place in order for a technology to be successful. And I would say that we need to continue to leverage that. I think historically it's been difficult to get international investment in not just the Nordics, but in Europe in general, because US investors were reluctant to make investments in companies where they weren't close by, where they had to travel to board meetings, where they felt that they wouldn't be able to give that same level of attention. So I think with this sort of more international focus and the fact that people can be literally anywhere now and contribute to technology development, I think we just have to continue to build on that. And I think there's no reason why a company cannot have both a US presence, for instance, and a presence in Denmark or in Sweden. And actually, one of the very first startups that I was involved in, Asperion Pharmaceuticals, back very early in my career. It was a US-based company, but actually founded on Italian technology. But then we had a grant from the Swedish government, and we actually had a Swedish subsidiary even at that early time, and that was back early in the 2000s. And that was a very, I think, a very successful path for the company to take. It allowed us to access great innovation in the Nordics, but also to tap into sort of US capital. So I don't think there's any reason for us to be too scared that companies are being founded in the Nordics, but then going public in the US, because I think it's a mark of success, and there's no reason to think that a company can't stay true to its roots and continue to grow in the Nordics as well as internationally.
Thank you, Amanda. That was a great reflection there. Now, Daya, thanks for staying patient here. So, Vinnova, biggest Swedish innovation agency here. I was very much impressed about your 12-year programs and their integration with the Danish, not with the Danish, with the Swedish innovation strategy. Can you talk a little bit more about that? How that in detail sort of plays out in who gets funded, what applications, what are you looking for, and so on and so forth. We as you know, Denmark is right now developing a new innovation strategy, and what would your biggest advice to the Danish government be from Innova's point of view in making that strategy?
Well, I mean, I could say that I think that in terms of having government agencies funding innovation, I think we're quite similar also according to what I heard. So Vinnova has a budget of about 3.5 billion kronor every year. Looking at life science and SMEs, that would be about 900 million per year. And we do that through a number of different instruments that are designed to make it easy to collaborate across borders. So academia, SMEs, large industrial companies and small companies through a number of different instruments. So I guess that the long-term commitment and the fact that the funding is actually there is the prerequisite. The other one is in what types of resources are actually being set up. So I could just briefly touch. So what we've heard now is a testament to why it's relevant to source innovation in the Nordics. And I think that's a testament to the fact that we do continuously come high in ranking, also in terms of startups and scale-ups in various deep tech areas. And I think it has to do with a number of things, both the long-term funding, the quality of the structures, be it incubators, where we have many of world-class, but primarily the ecosystem itself. And that has to do with leadership and culture. So another thing that we heard touched on now is that the Nordics can compete through public-private collaboration and data. And I can just say that in one of our efforts called AI of Sweden, we see that reflected. So our researchers and the companies that are part of that, they hear from their, for instance, US colleagues that they envy them for the opportunities here to get access to real quality and depth in data, for instance. And that has to do with the opportunities provided, not so much by government funding as it is in the type of leadership and the openness and the habit of co-creation that is already there. So I guess in terms of advice to the Danish government, I know we already have a lot of similarities. I think the things we need to improve is our ability to really work with a systems perspective, because we will not be able to really draw on the right innovations unless we can also adequately address the need for digital infrastructure, data governance, and policy aspects as well.
Okay, thank you for that, and I think I can see for Sarah here that we are about to sort of round up this lounge discussion, but circling back where we started, Daya, with the funding environment and maybe spin off as at least AirVenture is put in the world to help with. Can you talk a little bit about how you in your innovation systems sort of bridge between innovation and really company creation and creation of jobs?
I think that the principles are similar all over the world. So, of course, we draw on similar experiences from the Netherlands, from Israel, from Singapore, who, by the way, are quite good at the governance issues related to data. So we're no different. So we make sure that there is access to funding for really the early stages of collaboration between academia and innovation before the private sector is there. We make sure that the innovation infrastructure in terms of incubators, the learning between them, the mobility opportunities, etc., are also in place, the support around IP, etc. I think that the interesting opportunities are also, as we heard before, in terms of how well we manage to make sure that we can also leverage the opportunities to scale impact into actual healthcare. So Sweden has some things to learn from Denmark there, actually. But I think that we have a lot of commonalities in terms of how we see things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Søren, for moderating the panel discussion. And thank you so much, panelists, Christian Kettles, Darja Isaksson, and Amanda Hayward, for your time. Really appreciate you sharing your insights. You left us with a lot to chew on during the coming break, and I would like to encourage us to take that opportunity to digest. So have a break, and we'll come back for our final session for today that will start at 3:50, where we'll look into the innovation that has come out of Medicon Valley as a result of the crisis. As one of our earlier speakers today said, or quoted Winston Churchill, never waste a good crisis. And today we're going to hear on how some companies and researchers have taken that statement to heart. So welcome back at 3:50. Welcome back, everyone, to the final session of today, and welcome to those of you who are joining us for the first time as well. We're about to go into a session that is an extremely timely one. We know that the COVID-19 crisis has brought about a host of challenges, but also opportunities for healthcare and life science globally, but not least in this region as well. And given that Sweden and Denmark are the top innovation leaders in Europe in 2020, it's only natural that our region's life science ecosystem has risen to the occasion to provide innovative solutions in response to the COVID-19 crisis. Before we go into the presentations, I'd like to remind you once again that Slido is available for all of you who would like to ask questions to our speakers. You're very welcome to log in to slido.com and key in the event code MVA20 or access it via the QR code. Or if you have the video on minimized format, the Slido screen would also be on the right of your screen. So we have 4 really exciting presentations lined up. And to kick us off in this session, we have our very first speaker, Martina Kvist-Reimer, Executive Vice President and co-founder of Red Lead Discovery. Red Lead Discovery is a CRO focused on delivering services for integrated drug discovery and is one of the fastest growing life science companies in Sweden. Martina herself has had more than 20 years of experience in pharma and biotech in various leading project and management roles. And Martina today will talk to us on how necessity is the mother of invention, how an unprecedented global need facilitated new constellations within biotech. Martina, take it away.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for the kind introduction. I only want to add to my bio that our company, Red Lead Discovery, is focused on small molecules, on peptides, which you also will see in my presentation. Thank you for letting me introduce this session. Of course, it's very fascinating with COVID-19 and what it has led up to, both in terms of biotech and also academic collaboration. So I will try to give you a snapshot, and please be reminded, it's only a snapshot on some initiatives on a global and also regional scale in response to the SARS coronavirus 2 pandemic, and show you some examples how Red Lead Discovery, which is a small privately owned biotech, got involved into COVID-19 research. So as a first slide, I would like to connect to last year. If you joined the annual meeting of the MBA last year, you were maybe as impressed as I was by Professor Catherine Richardson's talk about the Sustainable Development Goals and how the goals can be used to guide business activities to improve life for the people inhabiting this planet. And Darja had a brooch, maybe you could see it on her cloth, depicting the Sustainable Development Goals. And the SDGs have of course, been impacted by the ongoing activities to fight COVID-19, such as having an immense positive effect on the goal number 3, health and well-being. But there's also much going on that has a positive impact on goal number 17, the partnership for the goals, which I want to reflect on in my presentation a little bit. And why is collaboration important? I think that because if we want to fight and win the battle against emerging pathogens, collaborations among groups with different expertise are absolutely necessary. So, due to the request by member organizations to create an R&D blueprint for action to prevent epidemics, the WHO already in 2016 worked with ideas that would reduce the time lag between identifying viral outbreaks, for example, Ebola, and the approval of vaccines and treatments with the aim to stop the outbreaks from turning into a public health emergency. And the name Disease X that the WHO shortlisted is a placeholder for a knowable unknown pathogen that they placed among its priority diseases. These are diseases with epidemic potential for which there are no or only insufficient countermeasures. So COVID-19 is, of course, Disease X, and the Coalition for the Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, the CEPI, is the largest vaccine development initiative ever. And this is targeting viruses that are potential epidemic threats. And CEPI was formed to accelerate the development of emerging vaccines and ensure that they are equitably distributed during outbreaks. And CEPI was launched in 2017, is supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and a number of governments. And in its role as a key player in the race for COVID-19 vaccine, it has taken some form of, you could say, stewardship for ensuring swift action by supporting companies that have a plug-and-play platform, for example, to respond to a multitude of pathogens. So already in 2019, it has formed an alliance with CureVac, the RNA vaccine company from Tübingen, Germany, that drives one of the projects that has good chances to bring a vaccine forward early. So another unprecedented form of enabling collaboration during this time is an initiative of the major publishers for scientific publications, for example, Elsevier, which are giving free access to content related to COVID-19 that otherwise would have been accessible for fee only. And this alongside bioarchives, which is making data available most nearly in real time ahead of peer review, which is also somewhat controversial, has led to a never seen before openness, but also willingness to share scientific findings to enable use of data in the fight against COVID-19. And another facet of data sharing to support this fight is the COVID-19 network meta-analysis, the COVID-NMA, which provides a living mapping of COVID-19 trials. You can see this in the background, which is available through interactive data visualizations. And this is a Cochrane collaboration that also includes other institutions, such as the Center for Evidence-Based Medicines. You see some logotypes down there, and the CEBMO from Odense, Denmark is part of it. And this collaboration conducts living evidence synthesis also on preventive interventions, treatments, and vaccines for COVID-19 to assist decision makers. And as we all know, research related to COVID-19 is no exception, is fueled by funding. And pledges of a substantial amount, 15 billion euro, have been made by EU countries, and a proportion of this also funds COVID-19 medical research. So I thought that we could have a closer look to the Öresund region, look at availability for funding for COVID-19 R&D collaborations and some effects for Danish and Swedish biotech. And we could say that, in the next slide, you can see that the governments of both Denmark, left-hand side, and Sweden, right-hand side, responded quickly and made funds available that were earmarked for COVID-19 medical research, but also societal initiatives. And I compiled some information. This is by no means complete. There's so much information out there, but this maybe serves as a snapshot of what has been happened, what has happened here in this region. And if you look to the left-hand side, Denmark can rely on the support of its very well-capitalized foundations like the Novo Nordisk Fonden, Carlsberg Fonden, Lundberg Fonden, and also the Innovation Fund. On the Danish side, a great proportion of foundation-funded projects are within the clinical research associated to hospitals and institutes, and many of those are in the Copenhagen region. And just to come back to the Innovationsfonden, among 32 collaborative projects which have been funded through this, in total 80 million Danish crowns. Few of them are also aimed at developing novel COVID treatments involving Danish biotech partners such as Symphogen. And a substantial amount of the Swedish funds went to the Science for Life lab, laboratory, but also a few small biotech, for example, from Lund, have been able to secure funding from Vinnova, such as Scintilla, and you will hear more from Evy Lundgren, Åke Lund, that is coming sometime after me here. And if we look at the EU, what has happened there? There's Horizon 2020 funded COVID-19 related projects. And at looking at only this specific call, I have looked at more calls where I just wanted to show you this one. EU has funded projects for different categories like preparedness and response, diagnostics, treatments and vaccines, with the proportions that you can see in this pie chart. And in total, this is 48 million euros. And some of this funding went also to Sweden and Denmark. And in this slide, on the right-hand side, you can see that Danish or Swedish partners, just looking at partners, are represented in every category here. And actually in the vaccine category, Sweden and Denmark are represented in both of the two funded projects. And if we break this down a little bit more, to the right-hand side now, you can see in the first two columns the amount of funding received in each category by a Danish or Swedish partner. And the third column represents the funding received by Danish biotech companies in the field of vaccines. While Swedish biotech companies, the fourth column, were additionally successful participating in treatment and diagnostics projects. So in total, from this call, biotech received 8% of the funding. And I think one can say that large public infrastructure at institutes or hospitals, as well as academic research groups, received the majority of accessible funds here. And then how about readily discovery? What have we done? I would like to present some of the activities that we have been involved in. And we were asked to help our Norwegian client, Immunor, with providing peptides of the coronavirus spike glycoprotein to be included in their peptide vaccine. And this created some interest here in Sweden, definitely. And this news then even made it into Swedish television, where my colleague Richard Johnson, that you can see in this image, was interviewed about our contribution. And further, we recently started a consortium with private and public organizations with the aim to assemble and utilize a plug-and-play platform for rapid response to the current SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, as well as future threats in the top box. We also perform drug discovery for inhibiting virus replications in the middle box, and specifically by targeting non-structural proteins 10, 14, and 16 of the virus. And for this, we employ our proprietary weak affinity chromatography, in short, WAC platform, a fragment-based lead discovery platform, which is co-owned by Saromics Biostructures, another privately owned company at Medicon Village, and our company, Berkeley Discovery. So here you can see the partners in the role in the consortium, and we're really excited to be able to utilize this screening platform in conjunction with the capabilities from the Fragmax project, the MAX4 and the ESS, the European Spallation Source. You heard about these large-scale infrastructures before. And this is a good spot to do research in here in this region. Frank Kozielski's group at the University College in London, on the left-hand side that you can see the logotype, is also very important, instrumental in testing lead compounds and mechanistic studies to support screening and selection of drug candidates. Now, amazingly, all of the partners are located in Lund, as you can see in this image, except for the UCL group, of course. But Frank Kozielski, if you see, look to the right-hand side in the upper corner, he lives very close to Lund, which makes this a nearly all Lund-based collaborative project, and thus it is appropriately named Lundaguard. And just to conclude, soon COVID-19 directly or indirectly affects us, of course, all. And if we want to contribute to the development of effective countermeasures, we also within the biotech, I think we need to employ an approach of collective responsibility and promote partnerships. And for this, networks are important, and they are important to enable collaboration. And this MVA meeting, as well as the Nordic Life Science Days, even if they're digital, and I haven't really been to a digital coffee break yet, I wonder how that works, are, of course, an excellent opportunity to start relationships with your next strategic alliance partner or your next investor. And you can also find us there, for example. Hopefully will enable you to join forces for the next great challenge that awaits humankind. And with that, I thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Martina. And I like that you have emphasized the importance of collaboration and how that's intensifying as a result of COVID-19. In one of your earlier slides, you mentioned disease X, which was identified by WHO, and now we know it's COVID-19. But if we think towards the future, and we know that this is likely, that a second disease X emerges in a couple of years, given our learnings from COVID-19, what do you think we can do differently to be better prepared, either in general or specifically in Medicon Valley?
I think in general, we will be in a very good position to... I hear an echo. I hope you don't hear it. Very good. I think that we are very well positioned now to meet the challenge of another pandemic disease. I think we will be much wiser in order what societal measures to take. In terms of funding, we could see that a tremendous amount of resource has been given to COVID-19 clinical and also more basic research, and that will happen again, I believe. And for the Medicon Valley region, I think that, yes, I showed you a collaboration mainly between partners here in Lund, but I think that maybe we should look at how we can join forces even across the Öresund in order to fight the next pandemic. And that is something that you can look at already today. And among the among the prioritized diseases, there are some diseases that you can look already today on, like flavivirus-induced diseases, that maybe we can see if we have something to meet the challenge if that one comes.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Martina, for your reflections and again, your insights. Thank you. So I'd like to invite our third speaker for this session on innovation during COVID-19, and she's Evy Lundgren Åkerlund, who is the CEO and founder of Scintella. Evy is a doctor of medical science and a senior lecturer, and has extensive experience in biomedical research and development, having previously held senior positions in both academia and industry. And Evy will speak to us today on the potential of stem cells in treating COVID-19 acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS for short. Over to you, Evy.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me. And I'm really glad to be here and to present Scintella, our stem cells, and our approach to COVID-19. So Scintella work actually in two areas, both in stem cell therapies and antibody therapies for aggressive cancers. And I will today talk about our stem cell therapy. And our business is actually based on a very specific integrin marker, so a marker technology platform that we call Xinmark. And we mainly focus on this marker down there named integrin alpha-10 beta-1. And this integrin marker was discovered in my lab at Lund University many years ago, and it was discovered on chondrocytes. And later on, we we discovered that this integrin is also present on mesenchymal stem cells, and a few years ago also on cancer cells, which is the other leg that Xintela is working on. So we would develop stem cell therapies now for both human and animals, and XSTEM, which is our stem cell platform, consists of MSCs, mesenchymal stem cells, that we isolate from adipose tissue. We select our stem cells using our integrin marker. I will talk a little bit more about that later in this presentation. And our current focus is osteoarthritis, and also, since quite recently, also COVID-19 related ARDS. To the right, you see a picture from our GMP facility where we now produce our stem cell product. So osteoarthritis, which is one, the main area we work with, is, as you know, huge and growing problem with when the cartilage is degraded, very painful, debilitating, and many of us suffer from this disease. And there are no treatments here. Today we offer treatment to relieve pain and reduce inflammation, but really nothing that can treat the real cause, the reason for the degradation of the cartilage. And many of us will end up with replacing our joint with a prosthesis. We develop effective allogeneic donated stem cell therapies. The aim is really to stop further development of osteoarthritis, to regenerate and heal the cartilage and reduce the need for joint replacement. And the aim is to inject the stem cells into the OA joint. And what is really great with allogeneic stem cells is also that we can isolate from one donor many cells and treat many patients. So it's a cost-effective therapy. I mentioned that we isolate our stem cells from adipose tissue from liposuction. So cells are isolated and then expanded. And here they're called ASC, so adipose stem cells. And these stem cells are then characterized based on their on their marker, expression of certain markers, their ability to differentiate to different cells, and also characterized by what they secrete, different factors that they secrete. But what is unique for Xintela and our stem cells is that we select the stem cell preparation to get really homogeneous and consistent and high quality stem cell. If you look to the left there, you see what could be a picture of stem cell preparations from adipose tissue, from other sources. So MSC preparations are known to be heterogeneous. They contain stem cells, but also other cells. But with our marker selection, then we can select out the high quality MSCs to, as I said, get high quality preparation and then also high quality product. So that's really how we are distinguished from other actors in the stem cell field. And this selection that we do has really great regulatory advantages, and also functional advantages. As I mentioned, homogeneous and high quality preparation, consistency between donors and donors. And we have also shown that our selected stem cell have a high differentiation capacity, also improved homing to the damaged tissue, and they also have high immune modulatory capacity. We have reached a number of important milestones for stem cells. We have developed the platform and patent protected XSTEM. And we have developed our first product, XSTEM OA, now ready for clinical studies. We have completed preclinical studies where we have evaluated our stem cells, and one such study is in a horse study where we selected equine MSCs and evaluated these cells in a post-traumatic OA model where we could show safety and also efficacy. And we have also in other animal studies also could shown in vivo homing of the cells to the damage. We plan our first in human study now in the OA patient that is planned to start in next year. We have built our GMP facility here in Lund, and we have our production process ready now. We plan also to apply to the Swedish MPA during Q4 for a production license to produce XSTEM. And then also we have received now recently very promising results from XSTEM in a preclinical study for ARDS, so COVID-19 related ARDS, and my coming slides, that's what I will talk a little bit more about. So we maybe some of what I will say here is a repetition of what you heard before, but we all now know about COVID-19 and this virus that really is ruling our lives. And this respiratory virus strongly affecting respiratory tract and the lungs. And we know from WHO that we've tremendous, really high number of confirmed cases now and confirmed death, getting close to 1.2 million. And this complication leading to death may include, respiratory failure, and also this complication called acute respiratory distress syndrome, ARDS. Also sepsis, septic shock, thromboembolism, and multi-organ failure, and so on. This COVID-19 related ARDS is a respiratory complication that can happen due to different medical conditions, including COVID-19. And here there is a fluid leakage from the small blood vessels into the lungs that cause severe shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, organ failure, and often death. And there are no effective or approved therapies for ARDS today. Today, the treatment includes oxygen, respiratory support, treating any underlying disorders, and supporting the patient's failing organs. And the mortality is very high. So I will not go into any details here, but the virus using specific mechanisms to bind to and to internalize and infect the host cells in the respiratory tract. And then this leads to cell apoptosis, to cell death, and pro-inflammatory cytokines are released. And this in the next step will lead to this massive immune reactions in lungs and other organs that we know as a cytokine storm that then is leading to ARDS, pneumonia, and pulmonary edema. And this is where stem cells come in, and the potential of stem cells to treat COVID-19 related ARDS. We know since many years that stem cells have immune modulatory capacity, and they are anti-inflammatory. And in the lung, there are many, in the ARDS, many biological actions that could include, regulation of immune cells, macrophages, T cells, neutrophils, and have an anti-inflammatory effect. Also, tissue repair, to repair the endothelial cell barrier, to decrease the leakage, and also to increase the clearance of fluid from the alveolar sac. So certainly there are a lot more we have to learn about the mechanisms of MSCs, but a lot of interesting information we already know. So because of this, there are several trials ongoing for treatment of COVID-19 patients with stem cells, and a number of companies are indeed looking to this treatment or to cell therapy as a potential solution. And I say currently 22 clinical trials ongoing. There are plenty more actually trials, but at least 20 or more than 20 serious and major trials ongoing to develop MSC-based therapies. And I listed some of the organizations and companies there in the slide. So, and in May this year, we got a grant from Vinnova that really made us also take this step to evaluate our MSCs for treatment of COVID-19. And we started then together with Professor Sandra Lindstedt at the Cardiothoracic Surgery Clinic in Lund to evaluate our selected MSCs in a validated animal model, a pig model for ARDS. And we're using our XStems, the stem cells that we're producing in our GMP-ready manufacturing facility in Lund. And we have recently been able to announce some really promising results from our ongoing ARDS study. As I said, this is still ongoing. We have completed a major part of the study, and we're really happy to see therapeutic effects of our MSCs in this pig model. We can reverse the critical ARDS condition by improving the lungs' ability to oxygenate the blood and stabilize the blood circulation system. And we have also, this is ongoing study now, and we have also taken blood samples and tissues that will also be evaluated to get the complete understanding of the effect of our MSCs in this model. And of course, the next step is then to plan for a clinical study in humans with COVID-19 related ARDS. So really happy about this study so far. And we're also happy about this. This is my final slide, where we recently, actually end of last week, received an intention to grant from the EPO, a European Patent Office for our stem cell product, XStem. So of course, this approved patent together with our GMP facility really now forms a great basis now for us to further develop these highly needed therapies for osteoarthritis and COVID-19 related ARDS and also other diseases. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Evi. Obviously, really exciting things happening, and it's great to see that there's a promising therapy that's in the pipeline. And, Xintela, together with many other companies, have had to really react and respond to COVID-19. And if we could ask you to reflect, if you compared your business plan in January, early this year, and to where you are today as a company, what would you say has been the biggest areas which you have had to adapt to because of COVID-19?
Well, we have come to a point with our development of our stem cells, and where we have developed it. So we have our stem cell platform, we have our GMP facility soon ready to produce. So and we have, as I said, focus on osteoarthritis, but also we were, I guess, early in the year also realized that we also and we are looking into other indications that will be the next focus for our XStem, for our stem cell. Certainly, then when in earlier in the year when COVID-19 appeared, that really made us take that move into that area, and which is quite different area compared to musculoskeletal diseases and osteoarthritis and so on. So I think it really opened up an opportunity for us to evaluate our stem cells for also that kind of therapy. We were.
Very good. I mean, it's fantastic to see that you were so agile as a company to take advantage of the opportunities that you saw, and of course to address a really real need that we have today with COVID-19. So thank you so much, Evie, for your time and your insights.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. And
Thank
I'd
you
like
very
to introduce our final speaker for today. And he's actually on site with us. His name is Stefan Torgrimsson. He is the CEO and co-founder of Immunitrack. And Stefan holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Copenhagen. And he has co-authored or authored numerous peer-reviewed articles during his research career. And Stefan will share with us on his work in mapping the adaptive immune response to SARS-CoV-2. Thank you, Stefan.
Thank you for having me here. Hello, everyone, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our ongoing efforts to help vaccine developers in working on creating a vaccine against this virus that has put the whole world on hold, you could say. So just a little agenda. I'm going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccine development and the current challenges. And then after that, I will give you a brief introduction to the background of our company, and also then present our contribution to the ongoing efforts to develop a vaccine. So if you go back in time, the whole situation we are in is quite new. Actually, on New Year's Eve, there was the first case report from Wuhan on the 31st of December 2019. And by the 9th of January, we knew that the virus was SARS-CoV-2, or so it was named. And the next day, the first sequence of the virus was then made publicly available. 2 weeks later, we had the first case, European case, and 1.5 months later, the virus was declared a global pandemic. And since then, the whole race for vaccine development has been ongoing worldwide. And as the sentence here states quite clearly, developing a vaccine is difficult at the best of times, but rarely have we seen a situation where we need to acquire basic knowledge of a novel virus at the same time as you try to eradicate it. So this is kind of a new challenge for everyone working in the field of vaccine research and development. So this is just an overview of what's going on currently in the vaccine globally. So there are around 130 vaccines being developed. They are at 93 in preclinical stage and 39 in the clinic. And they are using different technology platforms. We have RNA, DNA, fusion proteins and peptides, but also viral particles, as we just got a presentation before. And most of these vaccines aim at stimulating and neutralizing antibodies against the virus. And actually 73 of the vaccines being developed focus on raising antibodies, neutralizing antibodies against the spike protein. Now, when you develop a novel vaccine, there are a number of challenges, especially here where we have a lot of new technology being used to develop vaccines. They're often built on unproven platforms. I mean, there was no therapeutics on the market yet for many of these vaccine projects. There is vaccine safety concerns, and we don't know if they will protect us against COVID-19. And as you know, Eli Lilly had to at least briefly pause their clinical trial for their monoclonal antibody due to safety concern. And it has not shown any effective mode of action so far, but still they managed to sign a blockbuster agreement with the US government anyway, which means that I think they were quite desperate in developing vaccines. And as I stated before, most of the vaccines being developed focus on raising neutralizing antibodies against spike. However, we don't know if that will be sufficient for gaining full immunity, which is what you want in a vaccine project. So if you try and look at the main actors in gaining full immunity, we have, and this is very simplified, but you have the B cells, which are the antibody producing cells. You also have CD8 T cells, the CD4 T cells, and the antigen presenting cells. Now the question is, are T cells important also to gain full immunity or to stimulate the adaptive immune response? And many publications seem to indicate that. First of all, we can build some knowledge based on the SARS-CoV-1. And here it has actually been shown that in some situations, actually raising the neutralizing antibodies lead to acute lung injury. And when that happens in patients, that's often linked to inadequate CD4 T cell activity. So you need proper CD4 T cell activity to gain a good immune response. And also, if we look at SARS-CoV-1 again, it has been demonstrated in studies 5 years down the road that most of the people who had gotten the infection didn't have any antibody left in their blood, but only T cells, memory T cells. For SARS-CoV-2, there seems to be also a fast decline in antibody, although some recent studies seem to indicate that it's not the case, but bottom line is we don't know. And for SARS-CoV-2, multiple publications indicate that you need, there is a T cell response, first of all, and that you need it also for viral clearance. Now, if you look at this a bit busy picture, in the middle you have the representation of the SARS-CoV virus particle, and when that goes into patient's blood, on the one hand, it will circulate into the bloodstream, and hopefully being recognized by B cells that then will produce antibodies to clear the virus particles. On the other side, you have the virus particles which will go into cells, infect them, and use them as reactors to multiply. And in order to really get viral clearance, you need, on the one hand, the affected cells to be killed. On the other hand, you need the B cells to be activated to produce antibodies. Now, for all that to happen, you need the antigen-presenting cells to absorb the virus particles and to activate CD4 T cells that will be working like a chief of orchestra by, on the one hand, activating CD8 T cells and killing infected cells, and on the other hand, activate B cells into producing antibodies. Now, for all that to happen, what is you need epitope derived from the virus to be displayed on the surface of the different types of the infected cell, the APC, and the B cells. And these epitopes are presented by receptors called HLA, and that is the most decisive event in guiding the specificity of the adaptive immune response that will then make sure that you will clear the virus from patients. Now, to add a little level of complexity on top, actually the HLA receptors are polymorphic. That means you have different types of them and they have different sequences. And if we just look at two versions, the A0201 and the C0701, if you look at Caucasians, around 46% of the population do have that version of the HLA in them, and around 27% have the C0701. However, if you look at the Asian population, only 18% have the A0201, and only 1% have the C0701. And then, if you look across ethnicities, looking at white, black, Asians, and Hispanic, and look at the most proponent versions of these HLAs, it looks even more complicated, and the mixes are different. So you need actually to cover a number of alleles in order to cover a large population to be sure that you have all the epitopes of interest. Now, our company is a biotech company that has unique know-how in working with CD4 and CD8 T cell epitope mapping. Our CSO, Sune Justesen, during his time at the University of Copenhagen, was running the largest HLA platform, a recombinant platform. And even though our company has been working for less than 5 years on what we do, we actually managed to collaborate with companies working in the field of vaccine development, but mostly in immuno-oncology, from the University of Liverpool, Johns Hopkins, Dana-Farber, and Janssen, as well around 170 pharma and biotech companies worldwide. And what we essentially do in our company is to perform in vitro binding assays. So we actually in vitro assess which epitopes derive from drugs or cancer or viruses that may be displayed by these receptors and thereby stimulate a CD4 or CD8 T cell response. On top of that, we can also produce them as reagents that can be used to monitor or isolate the T cells and further study them. So the assay we like the most is an assay called the stability assay, where we actually look at we actually fold the HLAs with the epitope of interest, and thereupon we stress them using different mode of actions, using either urea, pH, or temperature. And the key features of this platform are multiple. First of all, we can run high throughput assessments of which epitopes can be displayed by these receptors. We have around 70 HLA class 1, 15 HLA class 2, so we're actually covering a lot of, most all ethnicities, I would say. And then the data that we actually generate is quite clear to interpret, and it correlates very well with the actual T-cell response. So this is just to summarize a little bit a study we did on something completely different on the HPV, which is also a virus. Here we studied two antigens, the E6 and E7. We generated 266 overlapping epitopes that we then screened for 13 HLA class 1 and 10 HLA class 2. And just to give you one example for one allele, the RB10301, not so much is known. However, we know that this epitope here is actually a T-cell epitope, and that is the most stable epitope in our screening. So anything above 50% of the reference peptide in terms of signal is seen as a potential T-cell epitope. Now, this is just to summarize the initial screening we did for SARS-CoV. We did it after that the sequence was published. We actually use a software tool together with the University of Copenhagen to screen potential epitopes. And we actually then, on top of that, did some measurements, created a report and published it. And the report was taken up by people around the world. We had around 900 people who actually downloaded the report. We have actually multiple studies being done based on this data we generated. And there's one we're involved in where we're going to study 100 patients that recovered from COVID to try and understand the CD4 and CD8 T-cell response. And we actually also have one study on healthcare workers that will be initiated soon. And this is just a report from Harvard and Boston University, where they actually tried to map T-cell epitopes from SARS-CoV, and actually were referring to our report. So that's quite nice. And finally, so this is a screen we have ongoing on the spike protein, because as I said initially, most vaccine development projects are focusing on that protein. So here we did actually 1,200 overlapping epitopes. We screened them for a number of HLA class 1 and class 2 to map potential T-cell epitopes. And the data looks around like this. So this is just a few examples. So anything above the threshold, which is a red line of potential T-cell epitopes, so we found quite a number. And you always are wondering whether the data you're generating correlates with reality. And this is just to show you that it does. So this is a publication from Nature where they tried to isolate T-cell epitopes from spike, where they found around 18 different T-cell epitopes. And in yellow, you have all the data that we generated, where we could actually find out which HLA class 1 and class 2 these different epitopes were binding, for all of them except from one, which really shows the power of our platform, I think. And so this data, we actually have put it together into a kit together with Intervis that will produce these peptides for people who actually want to do further analysis of patients' blood in terms of CD4 and CD8 T-cell response to the spike protein. So we hope that will be able to help the community in working on developing vaccines. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stefan. And I think, your presentation points to how, in response to needing to address this virus that was really unknown, we just needed to get more information about it. There has been an unprecedented sharing of research data. And I think Martina also mentioned that, researchers have been very open with their research.
Yes.
How do you think that will impact such, research going forward? Will we see similar patterns in much more open source data coming out of research, or will we go back to before, after COVID-19? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think in terms of pandemic, at least, this whole situation has really shown that we need to collaborate if we want to advance research fast. So I think it has really opened for the community to work together. But of course, it's big money. So many companies also trying to protect their way of developing vaccines. But I think overall, it has also shown the importance of working together and the importance of vaccine development in general, I think.
Absolutely. And just one final conclusion from you, Stefan, being the last speaker as well. We are based in Medicon Valley, and you have mentioned collaborations with the University of Copenhagen, among others. How do you see about collaborations on the Swedish side? Do you think that could be an asset going forward when responding to pandemics as well?
Definitely. I think the whole region has some unique capabilities. I mean, we're actually collaborating with some research group in Oslo, in Norway. And we also definitely see a potential for collaboration across Öresund with our Swedish partners here. So definitely, yes.
Great. Thank you so much, Stefan, for your time and your insights.
Sure.
So everyone, we are closing to the end of our event. We have had a really exciting lineup of speakers talking about framework conditions for life science, investment, as well as innovation in COVID-19. And I'd like to invite once again Søren Bregenholt, Chairman of MVA, to give us his final reflections from the day, concluding thoughts. Over to you, Søren.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, what a day. I think this is my 5th or 6th annual meeting. And it's really the first one we've done virtually. So an annual meeting in a COVID setting, quite an experience. It has, of course, been a theme throughout the day, not only in the way that we have conducted the meeting, but also in the underlying discussions or an underlying theme in discussions about funding, about science. And I think when we talk about science and life science, the last couple of talks, or actually the last 4 talks, have been really a good testament to the quality of the life science in the region, of our way of collaborating. So a couple of take-homes from today. I think it's interesting, starting off with Peter's State of the Medicon Valley report, that again we have been confirmed in the fact that life science in the region is strong, both research and innovation. And this was also directly confirmed by personal testimonies from people working in both European and American life science. So, and another point was that life science is a global game, and that it's played out locally in a few well-defined hotspots around the world. And if we look at Denmark and Sweden together, the take-home or the conclusion from Dyer from Vinnova was that Denmark or Sweden in that context are not countries; it's actually cities. So I think Medicon Valley Alliance, as a cluster region for Medicon Valley, the question here is really how do we make Denmark and Sweden a stronger global metropole for life science globally? How do we become a stronger player in that global game? What we've learned today is that we have all the regions, or all the ingredients for making the region great. We have the natural resources in terms of great science, great people, a talented workforce, well-educated workforce, and as it also transpired during the day, we have structured healthcare data as a unique asset. We talked about access to capital and support structures, and even though there are some differences between Denmark and Sweden, I think the conclusion from hearing the talks from Dyer from Vinnova and Anne-Marie from Innovation Fund Denmark is that really we have structures that have a significant similarity. Our talks on COVID-19 have also shown that we have the strong innovation fundamentals in the region, and that maybe this crisis has really brought out the ability and the focus and the willingness to collaborate, as we heard in the last couple of talks here, bringing the ecosystem together, not only in academia, hospitals and the industry, but also across the national borders between Denmark and Sweden. So I think we can, as a as a cluster organization, say and repeat what we heard from Christian earlier in the day, that Denmark and Sweden are two parts of a life science metropole that are similar enough to be able to work together, but also different enough to be able to complement and maybe synergize with each other, really bringing us on the forefront. And the key message is that we should, of course, take inspiration from others globally, but we should really focus on what is our unique value proposition and what is it that we bring forward. We need to continue building on what we have experienced here in the science and the innovation around COVID-19. We need to continue collaborating both regionally and nationally and regionally, and it's really about inspiring a willingness both on a political level as well, and as Berkeley said in his presentations, really driving change is sometimes really about driving human behaviors within the already existing frameworks. And with those words, a clear sort of recommendation both to the academic, the biotech, the hospital, but also the political system to continue to reinforce the collaboration within our fantastic region, Medicon Valley. And with those words, I want to end today's meeting by thanking you all out there behind the screens for your engagement, both through questions and polling on Slido. I want to thank all the speakers, and especially I want to thank Sarah and the whole Medicon Valley Alliance team for making this a fantastic experience. Thank you very much, and see you back here next year for the annual meeting 2021.